1 minute to Shaw broadcast. Thirty seconds to Shaw broadcast. We're live on Shaw.
Okay, so I'd like to welcome everybody to our meeting. I want to thank our broadcasting partners and our media partners for participating in our meeting and reporting on it and broadcasting it. Before we get going, there were just two items we were going to address. One, Councillor Hollingsworth asked for a brief moment to speak to a good news item that we missed at our last meeting. So I'll go to Councillor Hollingsworth. If I can have her mic, please. Councillor Hollingsworth, I think you're unmuted. Councillor Hollingsworth, can you hear me?
She hasn't connected her audio apparently.
Okay, so Councillor Hollingsworth has not yet connected her audio. I'll speak to the other matter before we get going. I just wanted to generally speak and send a message to the community about where we are at with COVID-19. As everybody's aware, the province has relaxed some restrictions and there are more people moving out and about throughout the community. And, I think that's a positive thing. I think people need to feel like they have a bit more liberty and they can do some more things. And I think it's positive for our economy that we start to do some more things.
Hello?
But I think it is, Councillor Hollingsworth, I'll come back to you in a second. I think it is critical than ever that we recognize that we need to follow Goma public health advice. So although people can be out and about and you can engage in some shopping activity and you can engage in some recreational activities, we need to learn how to live in a bit of a new normal. And it's important that we recognize how important physical distancing is. So as we are in the community and as we are crossing paths with other people in our community, we need to be mindful of our distance between those people. The current advice from Algoma Public Health is when you're in a situation where you can't physically distance, you should wear a non-surgical mask. Otherwise, you should be physically distant. And it's really critical that we all wash our hands. As tough as COVID-19 might be, apparently it does not stand up to soap and water. So washing your hands when you leave your house and when you return to your house is really important. It's also important that you recognize if you have any COVID-19 symptoms that you should stay home. You should self-isolate. I think one of the ways that we can keep each other safe and keep our caregivers safe and keep the people in our front line safe is by all following Algoma Public Health advice. So as more of us are moving throughout the community, let's make sure that we all follow the same set of rules. If you have COVID-19 symptoms, stay home. If you don't have COVID-19 symptoms, physical distance. When you're in a situation and you can't physical distance, you should wear a non-medical mask on your face. You should always wash your hands. We don't want to see in Sault Ste. Marie what we saw in Toronto on the weekend. We don't want to see a number of people congregate in the same area that could potentially spread this virus very quickly. As a community, we are doing well, and we will continue to do well if we continue to work together. And I have a tremendous amount of confidence that we can and we will, but we need to get these messages out and we need to all commit to follow the same set of rules. So I encourage everybody to go to Algoma Public Health's website, learn about those rules, learn about physical distancing, and really as best as you can, follow the rules and make sure that you're looking out for yourself, your health, your loved one's health, and the health of our community at large. And I want to thank you for doing that. Councillor Hollingsworth, if we can go to you now, if you wanted to make a few comments about the Ermiting or Old Stone House, I understand. So do we have Councillor Hollingsworth here? We're just going to get,
Just rejoining the meeting, apparently.
so she's
You
on
should be
mute
here
right now.
now.
Can you unmute her? Okay, Councillor Hollingsworth? Okay, Madam Clerk, we're just going to get started with the meeting then. I'll catch up with Councillor Hollingsworth later. So if you can just start the meeting, please.
Okay, so I have Mayor Provenzano, Councillor Christian, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Sorry.
She's dropped off again. Councillor Dufour. Councillor Vezo-Allen is absent. Councillor Hilsinger. Councillor Shoemaker.
Present.
Councillor Bruni.
Here.
Councillor Nero. Councillor Gardy.
Good afternoon.
Councillor Scott. So under agenda item 1, adoption of minutes, I have a motion by Councillors Nero and Shoemaker resolved that the minutes of regular council meeting of May 11, 2020 be approved.
All in favor? Motion is carried.
And under agenda item 3, declaration of pecuniary interest, Councillor Shoemaker has declared a conflict with respect to agenda item 6.1, the police services contract with Prince Township, as well as the associated bylaw 2020-115, as Prince Township is a client of the law firm. I haven't received any other declarations.
Any other declarations of conflict, Council? Being none?
Under agenda item 4, a motion by Councillors Bruni and Hilsinger resolved that the agenda for May 25, 2020 City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Carried. So Council, before we go any further, I just want a couple housekeeping items. The Deputy Clerk, Madison Zupa, is moderating our meeting, and she will control your mute. So you don't have to touch it. So you will be on mute entirely. Everybody's on mute. When I call on you to speak, she will unmute you and you'll be unmuted. And if you're not unmuted, I'll say that you're not unmuted until you get going. So you don't have to touch your mute. When you want to speak, when we get a little up further on into the meeting, you can put your hands up. I know when your hands are all up, you can't tell which one of you I'm acknowledging. So just leave them up for a few seconds and I'll make a list and I'll be sure to get all of you. So just make sure when you put your hand up, leave it up for 3 or 4 seconds. And when I see it, I'll make a list and you'll see me making a list and I'll just keep a list going. So appreciate your patience and cooperation through this.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Councillor Hollingsworth.
Okay.
But you know what? We can't really see you, Councillor Hollingsworth. If you could actually maybe adjust your camera so that we get a little more of your face there.
And that way you'll be able to hear and speak.
Okay, so
Can I see though if I do it that way?
anyway, we will move on. Madam Clerk, if we can have a motion to approve the agenda, please.
I believe that just carried. So under agenda item 5.1, we have a proclamation for National Accessibility Week.
Okay, so I have a proclamation for that. Whereas the corporation of the City of Sault Ste. Marie is committed to preventing, recognizing, and removing barriers beyond the legal requirements and to cultivate a culture of inclusion within the municipality amongst both residents and visitors. Whereas the corporation of the City of Sault Ste. Marie works diligently to phase in and ensure that those accessibility standards in the areas of customer service, information and communication, employment, transportation, and the built environment are met as accorded to law. Whereas the government of Ontario passed the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act in 2005 to make Ontario accessible for all Ontarians by 2025. Whereas 1 in 7 people in Ontario report a disability, and that number is expected to rise to 1 in 5 by 2036. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim May 26th to June 1st, 2020 as National Accessibility Week in Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you.
And We're just going to skip to agenda item 5.3, spina bifida and hydrocephalus awareness month.
Yeah. So every year we usually have Troy and Annette's council, Troy Chandler and Annette Chandler, and they've started this awareness drive in our community, and they've done a very admirable job doing that. And every year they have a walk and they raise awareness and funds for spina bifida and hydrocephalus. And obviously this year they couldn't attend council, but hopefully we will see them next year at the same time. So I will read their proclamation. Whereas hydrocephalus is an excessive accumulation of fluid in the brain, it may be present at birth or may develop at any stage later in life. Whereas spina bifida is a birth defect that develops in the first 4 weeks of pregnancy, resulting in varying degrees of permanent neurological damage. Whereas there is no cure for either of these conditions that result in varying degrees of disability. And Hydrocephalus Canada serves people with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, their families, and the public. And whereas Health Canada has proclaimed June as Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Awareness Month, and whereas there are many people who are not aware of the association or that offer support, information and education programs, and funds research to find ways to prevent and treat these conditions, whereas Hydrocephalus Canada encourages all Canadians to learn more about these conditions and to appreciate the challenges faced by individuals affected by them. Now therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby proclaim the month of June 2020 to be Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and I urge all citizens to give full consideration and attention to the Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus Association of Canada for their work on behalf of those with Spina Bifida and Hydrocephalus and their families.
Under agenda item 5.2, brain tumor awareness month.
So May is also Brain Tumor Awareness Month, and I have been the mayor of the community for over 5 years now, and I have read a lot of proclamations, and some of them have struck home for different reasons, and this one more than any other for obvious reasons. As you're all aware, my wife Kylie was diagnosed with a brain tumor late last year. She shared that story with the community this month for Brain Tumor Awareness Month, to raise awareness about brain tumors and to raise money for brain tumor research. I'm really proud of the strength and grace that she showed in sharing her story. And we are giving this proclamation tonight to recognize that. I'd also like to recognize that there are a number of people in the community that are also dealing with brain tumors that have reached out to Kylie and that she has developed relationships with and found a lot of support from. And I'd also like to thank the community at large. Many of you have reached out to her. Many of you have reached out to me to express concern and care and support for our family. It has been greatly appreciated, and it has made an important difference. I'm glad to say that Kylie and I are both confident in her care and in her ability to meet this challenge, and we are confident we will meet this challenge. But in no small part due to her own attitude and her own strength, and to the care, love, and support we have around us in our family and friends, and also in the community at large. Sault Ste. Marie is a very generous and kind community. As the mayor, I've seen it a number of times, but in this specific case, I felt it. And I want to thank the community for reaching out to both me and her in the way that you have. So I'm going to read this proclamation in honor of Brain Tumor Awareness Month, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what Kylie's doing with some of her friends in Sault Ste. Marie. Whereas the causes of and cure for brain tumors are unknown, and early detection and treatment is vital to prolonged improved survival. Whereas brain tumors strike people of all ages, crossing all economic, social, and ethnic boundaries. And whereas brain tumors are the most common cause of solid cancer death in children and young adults. And whereas approximately 27 Canadians a day are diagnosed with a brain tumor. And whereas the mission of the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada is to reach every Canadian affected by a brain tumor through support, education, and information and research. Now, therefore, I, Christian Provenzano, as Mayor of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, do hereby declare that May is Brain Tumor Awareness Month in the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and ask everyone to wear gray on May 27, 2020 to raise awareness about brain tumors and to show support for those who have brain tumors. So we are all wearing gray on May 27th to raise awareness and to turn Algoma gray. It's a campaign that Kylie and a number of people that she's interacted with locally have started locally, but it's actually a broader campaign that was started in another community by a group of brain tumor survivors and people that are fighting brain tumors that Kylie has been working with and they started a campaign to turn May gray. So I want to recognize their good work. We're also doing a virtual walk on June 27th, and you're welcome to participate in that. You could find that information on that on the Brain Tumor of Canada website, their page. You could also find information on Kylie's social media accounts and my social media accounts. Kylie has a team, they're called the Brainstormers, and there's a competition to raise funds across the country. My wife is an incredibly competitive person, and right now she and her team are in first place, and she tends to stay there in the country till June 27th because she wants to bring the Brain Tumor Foundation of Canada banner to Sault Ste. Marie, and I have every confidence that she will. So we appreciate everybody's support. We welcome everybody to join us on May 27th by wearing gray and tweeting out or putting your pictures on Instagram and Facebook. And anybody who wants to participate in the virtual walk on June 27th, please reach out. We'd be happy to have you involved in that. So thank you to everybody, and thank you to City Council. I told many of you late last year what we were dealing with, and I appreciate your discretion in that, and I also appreciate your support of me as I've been dealing with this, and as it's had demands of my time. You've been very helpful, so I want to express my gratitude to all of City Council, and thank you for that. Madam Clerk, if we can move on, please.
We're moving to consent. I have a motion by Councillors Bruni and Hilsinger. Resolved that all of the items listed under date May 25, 2020, agenda item 6, consent agenda, be approved as recommended.
Hey, Council, before we get to the consent agenda, I want to just take 6.6 out of consent. It's the report that deals with the additional dog park, so we're going to remove that from consent. Are there any other matters that councillors want to be removed from consent before we talk about consent? Councillor Scott? If I can have Councillor Scott's mic, please.
Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I please get 6.1 removed?
Yeah, go ahead. 6.1 and 6.6. Anything else, Council? Okay, well, with that noted, we're on the consent agenda. Councillor Bruni, I'll start with you. If I can have Councillor Bruni's mic, please. Councillor Bruni, just wait. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Bruni, your mic's on.
Yeah, I'll pass right now, Mayor Provenzano. I'll be asking a few questions later on.
Okay, so we'll go to Councillor Christian. Right, yeah, Councillor Christian.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to just quickly talk about 6.10, the 2020 resurfacing.
Okay, yeah, so we're on 6.10.
I just want to be clear on the source of this money. This is from underutilization in the road construction account. Is that correct?
Well, I think Councillor Christian, we'll have the CEO or Mr. Elliott correct me if I'm wrong, but a few of our early projects have come back under tender. Right. So the money that we have recovered from them being under the estimates that we budgeted for is then going to be used for some resurfacing.
Okay, so I want to direct a question to, I believe, Mr. Elliott on this, and it may just be coincidence, but I didn't see anything in the East End. Are we simply going off the list of priority resurfacing projects? Is that how we determine these extra streets? Just coincidence, I guess, that there's nothing in the East End?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, most of the worst roads are not in Ward 1. As a matter of fact, it's so the resurfacing is generally concentrated in the older parts of town. But I would add also that Trunk Road is under the Connecting Link program will receive $3 million of resurfacing there. So that certainly is in the East End.
Okay. That's all I have for 6.10. I have a couple other items, but if anybody else has anything on 6.1.
Yeah, anybody else in 6.10? Nobody else in 6.10. Councillor Christian, go on.
Thank you. 6.16, our insurance renewal, I believe.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I read, obviously, I read the documentation, and I understand that rates tend to go higher. But my question, I guess, is directed to our legal department. We went from 170 claims in 2018 to 395. And the obvious question is, why such a huge spike, double in 1 year? Is there any pattern there? Is there something that happened that caused doubling in our claims?
So is the city solicitor take that?
Yes, thanks. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian. Many of those claims were pothole claims. We pretty much doubled our pothole claims in the first couple of months of 2019. The other claims that we are seeing coming in are consistent, but there have been more of those kinds of claims.
Okay. And if I read it correctly, we're very, very limited in terms of who we could source for municipal insurance. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. There's been a number of mergers of some of the larger insurance companies, and so we're dealing with fewer people in the market.
Okay. And can you explain to me what a claims clearing account is? I just want to understand what that is.
I'm going to also ask Michelle to assist with that, but it is an account that is set up in our department to pay out of claims that we settle on matters, personal injury, those types of things. Some of them we can settle them out under the deductible. Some are settled out after they've had to go out to outside counsel and negotiation or trial has taken place.
I see. So essentially, if the insurance company is not paying, we try to step in if they're seeking legal counsel and continuing to pursue claims against the city?
No, sorry, just to clarify, when there is a claim that's brought in and it's an insurance claim, as most of them are, they go out to the counsel that is approved by our insurance company. And we pay the first amount up to the deductible, and then after that, the insurance company, it's through the insurance.
Okay, all right, thank you. I guess my only comment here is that obviously competition is a good thing, and I hope that our representatives from AMO and all of our municipal organizations are lobbying for, I don't know how much influence they can have, but clearly making the request and the need for more competition in this field, making sure that message is getting out there, because being limited in terms of who we can deal with is an expensive proposition for us when it comes to insurance. Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else in 6.16? Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Ms. Field. Can you give us an example of, for instance, a pothole claim? What is the process and what's the length of the process so the taxpayer does receive a response? On occasion, I've called the legal department many times. It's about 120 days plus that they have not received anything, confirmation if they won their appeal or not. So would you be able to provide a little bit of information on that?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, there's a process in place where people can make a complaint. There are complaint procedures online. And when they come to our department, it's then researched. It goes out to our adjuster who looks into it, gives us a report on it. We also look to see if where they say they had the claim actually had damage. to the road, and then a decision is made as to whether there's payment to be made or not, and then it goes through that process of payment or denial.
Is there a time period when someone puts in a claim?
I don't, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, I don't deal with these claims directly myself, but I don't believe that there's a timeline set out as in we'll get back to you within 30 days or we'll have a response to you in 45. I don't believe that that's in place.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else on 6.16? Seeing none. Councillor Christian, you have anything else?
Did Mr. Mayor, did you see we pulled 6.9?
We did not pull 6.9.
I guess I just, I have a comment on 6.9. And
Go ahead.
okay, I just, I read it and I understand the importance of revitalizing that area and refurbishing it. But there are many things in the Sioux that require priority attention. My concern is that a 400,000+ potential bill at this stage is I'm a little concerned about it. It seems like a lot of money right now, given what we're up against with the pandemic fallout. I'm not quite sure where this money's coming from. I'm just concerned. I want to be on the record as saying I'm concerned about us spending that type of money should this go forward to the budget. Thank you.
Sure. Councillor Christian, maybe if I could just have the CEO clarify. Mr. CEO, as I understand it, this is just being referred to the 2021 capital budget, but that does not necessarily mean it will become a spend. Sorry, in the 2021 capital budget. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. This report only is referring it to the 2021 capital budget, where it will go through the same kind of prioritization process that other items on that budget go, and in the end will be decided by council whether it receives money or funding or not.
So Councillor Christian, you wouldn't be agreeing to invest this money in this parking lot tonight, or you wouldn't be committed to that. You're just referring it to the 2021 capital budgeting process.
I understand. I just felt that I needed to say something.
No, it's a legitimate point. If this was coming forward to agree to spend this money on this project now, tonight, I don't think I would have supported it myself.
Thank you very much. That's it for me, Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else on what was that, 6.9? Anybody else on 6.9? Seeing none, that's it for you, Councillor Christian. Councillor Nero, do you have anything on consent?
Only on the ones that are pulled, so I have nothing right now.
Councillor Shoemaker, do you have anything on consent? I can always count on you to have something on consent, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 6.7, Parks Revitalization Plan.
Go ahead.
I'm just trying to open it here with my split screen. Through you to Mr. Lamming. I'm just trying to find it here. So, Mr. Lamming, the parks that are indicated as being on the docket for next year seem to me to be in pretty close proximity to other parks. Like, for example, is it David Kyle Park is not far from Cora Park, or the park that's on Cora Road. I don't know if it's called Cora Park. And I know at Cora, the park that's on Cora Road, there are lots of play structures. I don't think I've ever seen anyone there, but does the revitalization plan take into consideration what services are available nearby? It seems to me like it's not, frankly.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. Yes, your point is well taken. We did consider neighboring parks from schools and other green space. That's why there was 4 main categories of ranking, and one was the condition of the age of the equipment, the total population within 500 meters, the walkability of other parks, which you mentioned, and also the low-income status, which is a key indicator. And what that means is basically was the after-tax income that individuals are have left after devoting a share to items such as clothing and shelter and food. So we combined all 4 of those categories, got a score to 25, and then ranked the parks, all 78 parks across the municipality. So in the year 2021, Rosedale Park, Parkland, and Downey Park did rank the highest in a scoring across those 4 categories. And that information was done in conjunction with the Innovation Center to extract the data and project out.
Okay, so are the I guess what you're saying is the parks where the after-tax income levels are the lowest are higher on the priority list?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, that's correct. So the lower income status does come into play. The lower the average income threshold, that'd be a higher mark. Same with the walkability. The farther walking, the higher the score. Total population will get a higher score, and then the condition and the age of the equipment, if it's in to say some of the higher standards of some of the parks, it would be ranked higher as well. And it should note that the average age of our infrastructure in a lot of our parks is 20 years, and we do inspect that monthly with our playground practitioners.
Okay, with respect to Anna Marinelli Park, that's up on the docket for this year to be revitalized, I see that Canadian Tire Jumpstart funding has fallen through because of the pandemic, but that's not going to scale back what the plans are for Anna Marinelli, is it?
To you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Shoemaker, no, it's not. We're just on site last week, and we originally received 50,000 through the soup kitchen, and we actually received another 20,000 through some nature play-based features they'd like to see there. So staff from Community Services and Public Works are taking some of the feedback from the Jamestown neighborhood strategy, and specific to the park itself, one key thing that came forward was that they'd like to have some solid surface. So rubberized surface is something that's key for that area. Also like to see how the existing swing set and play structures would fit in, and also some pathing that would connect to the soup kitchen as another item that would be key as well. So we're confident for the amount of money there that we're able to get at least the solid surface for that park. And then with the leftover, we could put it towards remaining path work, and also with respect to the play structure that could be amplified.
Okay, no, that's good, because I think that, I've talked a lot about that area. I think it's one that is in desperate need of some investment from the city. So glad to hear that that's all going forward. From a procedural perspective, I don't know if this is a question for you, Mr. Lamming, or Mr. White, but some of the parks on here, I raised concern by email to Mr. Lamming about some of the parks here that are currently just green space and are going to be getting equipment or amenities in the future. Is the list of parks that is going to be tackled each year going to come to council for approval? Or if we approve this tonight, is the list set for the next 4 or 5 years or 6 years, whatever it is?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, we were looking at potentially allocating $150,000 per year, which would be a pool of funds. So if you access all of it, it would be depleted. But if you did not utilize it, it would carry forward each year. So to your point of your question, this would be a plan that we would like to execute a 5-year plan moving forward, but there would be a budget request that we have for $150,000 for the upcoming year. We'd like to see that move forward, but maybe the CEO would like to add something to that statement.
Yeah, I think what Councilor Shoemaker is looking for is he's looking for clarity, and I understand why, on whether or not, outside of the funding, on whether or not which parts you're doing on an annual basis will be coming to council for its approval, or if it's simply approved now if you're off and running. So, Mr. CEO, maybe you can clarify that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. In essence, I see this program as it develops, because it's a new program, being something similar to your capital works program that comes before you. So while staff work towards having a kind of a 5-year plan and have things listed out, that it would come to council. You would see kind of what the plan is, but also have an opportunity to approve those plans and question staff as to why certain parks are on it.
Okay, no, that's perfect. I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, I mean, it looks like we're in year one. Anna Marinelli's in desperate need of revitalization, and so I think the plan makes lots of sense.
Anybody else in 6.7? So we have Councillor Dufour and then Councillor Gardy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's more of a comment. I just wanted to give staff kudos for including Rosedale on their list for next year. It's going to time very nicely with the opening of the new community hub up on Chapel Avenue and with the redevelopment and the new seniors apartments that the DSAB is putting up there, which should be opening at the same time. So don't know if it was intentional, but kudos nonetheless. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Gardy. If we can know, Councillor Gardy, we don't have your mic yet. So if we could, the deputy clerk could unmute Councillor Gardy, please.
He has to hit OK.
He has to hit OK? Oh. I don't think he's seeing an OK on his screen. Is she unmuting him?
She's trying.
Yes.
Okay, I can do it. We're good.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Laming. Mr. Laming, I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot. If not, if you can get back to me after the meeting, that'd be more than acceptable. One is, how many parks do we have, Mr. Laming, in town in total, outside of the major ones that you listed?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, in addition to the 78 parks, it was noted in the report that we have 7 other complexes in addition to the 78 parks. And so those encompass Bellevue Park, Clerk Park, Queen Elizabeth Sports Complex, Strathclair Sports Complex, Elliott Sports Complex, North Street, and Pointe de Chene Park. So that's under the city. If you're talking about additional parks that aren't city, then I'm not. If you could provide clarity, I could get information back to you.
So okay. So there are 85 city-owned, city-run parks.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. On referring to the list that we had in front of us, that we have in front of us, I'm just looking specifically at Downey Park and just a bit of history there at the corner of Hudson and Cathcart. Do you know, has there ever been any kind of equipment at that site in the past? I don't recall it, but it doesn't mean that there wasn't.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, I think I'll defer this question to either Susan Hampton Beach or Travis, Ms. Trifter, Travis Reed.
Yeah, it's Travis here, and through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. That Downey site, I believe at one time when it was school property, had equipment at it, but since it was turned over to the city, there isn't any equipment. There's a bocce court and some park benches, but that's about it. But I believe it was identified a place that could use equipment given the neighborhood. And when we went through our scoring mechanism, it was shown that it was in need of equipment.
Thanks, Mr. Reed. That bocce court that you referenced, city owned, or is that the Marconis? That's ours?
It's city owned, yes.
Okay. Thank you. I think it's more of a comment, Mr. Mayor. We have a number of parks. We have 85 parks. Maybe a question to Mr. Laming. Mr. Laming, through you, Mr. Mayor, is there any type of way to precisely kind of gauge usage of parks in our community? Like if we were to focus on even a few, how do we kind of quantify how much they're being used, if at all, if we're able to?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Council.
Go ahead, Mr. Lanning.
Yeah, sorry. Just on certain uses for parks, and when we go, we do have times where we do counts in parks for usage if tasked to do so. So of our 78 parks, should also reference that of the 78, we also have 63 with play structures, which are important to our neighborhoods in general. So if we're tasked, we can do tracking of counts if we're tasked. But as you say, there's 78, so that's a pretty tall order to do on a regular basis.
Understood. And then, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to make one final comment referring to one of the parks on the list. David Kyle, I'm glad to see that there's going to be some revitalization there. That being said, you know, we have a number of parks in town that are quite large in terms of their area, that being one of them. I think there could be ample use, there could be ample space for a very nice park there. But, you know, I don't know if we would make some of that property available to a developer if it might not be considered. Anyway, that's a comment for that. We'll talk more about that at a later date. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else in 6.7? Seeing none, Councilor Shoemaker, do you have anything else on these consent agenda? Go ahead, can I have Councilor Shoemaker's mic, please? Go ahead.
Thank you. 6.11, Albert and Andrew Street intersection.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think to either Mr. Elliott or Mr. Rumiel. If I'm understanding this report correctly, Mr. Rumiel or Mr. Elliott, what used to be a straight through for traffic going eastbound on Albert Street, or at least for the last 6 or 7 years has been a straight through, they'll have to stop. It'll be like a two-way stop, if you can call it that.
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, that's correct. It'll be a two-way stop on two one-way streets.
Okay. So we're kind of going back to some traffic control that not quite as extensive as it was previously, but to traffic control where there was no traffic control previously for the last number of years. We had a problem at the next intersection, which was Gore and Albert. Will we be installing a larger stop sign and a flashing red light when the stop sign does go in on Albert Street?
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, that's a good question. I know Council adopted a policy of putting flashing reds at stop signs where we removed signals, but I believe it may be appropriate there to put a flashing red on that new stop sign. Yes.
I think, from my perspective, that's what I'd want. I don't know if I need to move to do that. I suppose I should move to do that, actually, so that I can be assured that it gets done. So that would be my. I would move that a flashing red be installed above that stop sign when it is installed.
Mr. CEO, do we need a motion for that? I understand Councilor Shoemaker's kind of concern. He wants the assurance it's done, but does that require a motion? Can staff simply give us an assurance? Go ahead.
To you, Mr. Mayor, staff can certainly affect that. We can get that done, and we can show that it would be done through minutes of the senior management team meeting. If Councilor Shoemaker wished to have an official account on the council record, he would need to move a motion. If that's the way we go, then we would need to separate this out from consent.
Yeah. So, Councilor Shoemaker, would you take the CEO's assurance at this meeting that they'll paper that and get it back to you? And if you're not satisfied with that, maybe we can put the motion on the next agenda.
Sure.
Okay.
That was it on this item. I do want to thank Seema and Mr. Rumiel for tackling this intersection. It has been a problem.
It has been, and happy to see that it's going to change. Anybody else in 6.11? Councilor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to echo a lot of what Councilor Shoemaker was saying, and I also wanted to bring my thanks to staff for getting this report back to us in time for us to be able to take advantage of some of the extra miscellaneous construction money that we have this year to be able to get this done before another winter where we really have seen an increase in accidents. I appreciate it. The community appreciates it, and I'm sure all the businesses in the area will appreciate it as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Shoemaker, anything else in consent? So we're done with Councillor Shoemaker. Councillor Hollingsworth, did you have anything on the consent agenda?
Yes, I do.
Okay, which number?
I have item 6.13, which is the Town of Bruce Mines Agreement for Building Inspection Services.
Go ahead.
Okay. May I just point this to Mr. White? Just out of curiosity, do we provide this service for any other town?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we do provide the services. In this case, it's a one-off service, and it's because the building that's going to be constructed, it will be owned by an engineering firm that also does work for the town, so they needed somebody independent to provide the services, but it is a one-off. If you want any more technical detail, I would ask the city solicitor to give the answer.
Okay. No, I was just curious to see if there's any other ideas. And thank you. That's it for 6.13.
Anybody else on 6.13? Councillor Scott, can I have Councillor Scott's mic, please? Go ahead, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question for clarification to make sure I understood this correctly. So the report does mention that the town of Bruce Mines will be paying the same amount that's outlined in the user fees. So that would mean that they're paying the exact same amount that, and the same work, like work, would be in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. Is that correct?
I'll direct that to the city solicitor.
That's probably a better question, if I could, for
CFO?
what, for Freddie.
Go for Mr. Posabon on the line.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Christian Scott, Councillor Scott, they'd be paying our permit fees for.
Okay. So it would be equal pay for equal work. The same work that would be done here, it's going to cost the same amount that's going to be to do it there.
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes, with the exception of mileage. We're charging a fee for mileage to run from the city limits of Bruce Mines.
Of course. Perfect. That was everything I wanted to know about that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so anybody else in 6.13? Okay. Anything else in the consent agenda, Councillor Hollingsworth?
Item 6.15, accessibility status 2020. And I guess my question goes to Mr. Don McConnell, if he's on the phone.
Hello, yes.
Okay. Just one question. Accessibility, as you've outlined, is very important for our community, and we've been working quite hard on the last number of years to make sure accessibility is one of our top priorities. Can you comment on Queen Street? I thought there was some discussion, besides cutting out the curbs, but I thought there was some discussion about highlighting handicap parking on Queen Street. And if we are heading in that direction, I'm under the impression that these areas will be the first to be snow plowed in the winter. Again, those that have challenges sometimes need to park on the street. So are we designating blue spots like other communities are doing?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, the Accessibility Advisory Committee has spent some time on that exact question, which is how do you have designated parking spaces that are barrier-free with on-street parking? And it's very difficult. I won't go into a lot of details, but what you want to do is avoid people getting out into traffic. So it is much more difficult than in a standard parking lot where you can simply have wider spaces. We will be looking at that as Mr. Elliott in his 5-year capital works plan proposes to, within the next 2 years, look at resurfacing Queen Street. And as part of that, we're going to look at that opportunity to see what we can do about providing barrier-free parking spaces on Queen Street. And with regards to the snow plowing, I'm going to have to refer that question to Mr. Girardi.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. As far as the snow plowing is concerned, certainly Queen Street, the downtown area in itself, is a priority for us. Until we know what the new layout's going to be, it'd be pretty difficult for me to give any kind of decision on how we would attack and clean those spots before any others. So once we see a plan in the next few years, we will obviously be working with the planning department and engineering to make some decisions on how we're going to do the clearing.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else on 6.15? Seeing none, Councillor Hollingsworth, do you have anything else on the consent agenda?
No, I don't. Thank you. No.
Okay, that brings me to Councillor Dufour. Do you have anything on the consent agenda?
My items have been brought up already. Thank you.
Councillor Hilsinger, do you have anything on the consent agenda?
I do not.
Councillor Gardy, do you have anything on the consent agenda?
I do. I got a couple real quickly. 6.4.
6.4. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Gardy.
Mr. Mayor, if you could just help with this one. I'm having some troubles with my screen freezing up here. Would that be going to Mr. Girardi or Miss Hamilton Beach?
Just ask the question, and whomever of the two of them thinks it should answer it will.
Perfect. Real quickly. I'm not that familiar with some of this other equipment, but I think a lot of us are familiar with half tons. I was just surprised that there was only one dealer came back. Is that a bit of an exception, or is that often the case, even with more common kind of vehicles as the pickup truck, the half ton?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, it's Larry Girard here speaking. I just wanted to say we were kind of surprised ourselves. We hoped that more people would get involved with the tendering process, but surprise to us, for something as simple as a half-ton 4x4, there wasn't a lot of interest. So quite frankly, we got one. Proust Chevrolet has always been a common one who's submitted for these type of vehicles. They're a very plain vehicle, 4x4 truck that's used by our shift foreman, and it gets a high amount of kilometers. So. But that's, we're as surprised as you are sometimes.
Yeah, interesting. Glad they did. I'm just surprised others didn't. I think that's it on 6.4, Mr. Mayor, and I'm looking at 6.
One second. Anybody else in 6.4? Seeing none, go ahead, Councillor Gardy.
It's going to be 6.6, but I think that got pulled. So
it did. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Councillor Scott, do you have anything else on the consent agenda?
No, I do not.
Okay, so then we can vote on the consent agenda, and then we can move to the matters that were pulled. Madam Clerk, I think you already read the consent motion.
I did read the motion, so we'll accept 6.1 and 6.6.
Okay, all in favor? Consent is carried. So we will move on to 6.1. Councillor Scott, you wanted this pulled, so we'll go to you. Do we have the police chief on the line, Mr. CEO?
Yes, we do.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have so many questions as much as the last time that this came across. I was opposed to it. I understand that it does bring in a source of income for the police, and I do understand that it won't cause any increased work. It's more of a just a stance that I'm taking, in the sense that they do pay less per person for equivalent services, and I do believe that there are certain residents of Ward 5 where the police response would actually take them a little bit longer than it would to get to certain areas in Prince. And I understand that that's not how it actually works out, but in my mind, that's kind of my argument and my stance on it is that they are paying less per capita, even though I am aware that's not technically how it's charged, and I am aware that it will not cause any increased costs for police services. It's more of a principle matter, so that's the main reason why I wanted it pulled, and that's I intend to vote against it again.
Okay, Councillor Nero.
Mr. Mayor, tend to agree with the comments from Councillor Scott. My question is related to the agreement for the cost of service. It seems like we were, and I understand that the agreement relies on the consumer price index to raise that price for service. It seems that we're stuck at 175 for the last number of years. So can the CAO or the police chief speak to that? I mean, if the CPI is not causing increases in the cost for service, and our cost for service is going up, then I feel we have to make an agreement that sets out other conditions to raise the cost of service.
Did you want to speak to that, Mr. CEO?
Sure. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. As there's two parts to that. One, that was the initial amount council agreed to last year. We're agreeing to it now this year. In the meantime, it was under the auspices of an interim agreement, which was at a higher amount, so we didn't feel the need to increase the starting point, even though it was a year later. What I can say to you is if we were looking at more indicators to try to assess the increase in pricing going forward, we would likely not have an agreement.
But I guess I don't know what the answer to that, and I don't know what my next question would be. I mean, it's just a do or die agreement that Prince Township has given to us and said, this is the price we're going to pay. If you don't want it, then we'll look out elsewhere to get it.
Not quite. If we can just kind of recap the history of it. You're aware that we had a different agreement, which is the rate that we're currently charging at because we haven't formalized this agreement yet. And Prince went out and priced an OPP agreement and was going to go with the OPP because in their position, it was significantly cheaper than Sault Ste. Marie Police Services. So Sault Ste. Marie Police Services through the police chief, and this police chief could speak to this, he's on the line. The police chief wanted to continue to provide this service to Prince. He saw value in it both for the police services in the city and for Prince. And so he sought the permission of the police service board to talk to Prince about it. And so he went out to Prince and met with them. And this is what was negotiated, you know, in accord with the police chief and the representatives of Prince and agreeable to the police service board. So it wasn't just like Prince said, here it is, take it or leave it. But, you know, the agreement was negotiated in good faith between Sault Ste. Marie Police Services and Prince. And the chief thinks it's a fair agreement for both Prince and Sault Ste. Marie Police Services. And, you know, as you're aware, council approved it last year, but there was a delay in getting it back for some legal things that had to be worked out. So to Malcolm's point, we have continued to charge over the past year the previous contract. So like we haven't, it's not that the 175 isn't adjusted, we just haven't charged the 175 yet. So they were paying the higher rate that they were paying, that they were trying to get away from when they went to OPP. So Chief, do you want to add anything to what I said, Chief?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. When we look at the calls for service, and this is reported each month to the Police Services Board, you're looking at maybe 7 occurrences on average for the past 2 years each month, with a total of between 78 and 80 total calls for service in the entire year. So, you know, from a labor perspective and from a work perspective, Prince does not cause us any staffing issues, any additional workload. We are better suited geographically, obviously, to respond to their calls for service, and the OPP price was higher. I agree and support the CAO's position that if we went higher, we would lose that money, and given provincial offsets, that's not a good thing to do in this climate.
May I respond, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, Councilor Nero.
Yeah, Mr. Chief, I appreciate that. I appreciate that answer. I understand where you're coming from and the CAO. My only comment to that would be that even though, never mind, I would put aside the number of calls that we get to Prince, we're servicing that area outside of Prince as a rural area. So our police force is already enforcing the police services out in that area. But our costs go up for that same police force that's enforcing the city part of that area. So, but we're not passing those costs back on to Prince because we have an agreement with them. I just believe that if our costs go up to enforce police services in the rural areas of the city, we should somehow capture Prince Township in that. And I may be completely wrong on this, but
Well, that's the CPI adjustment.
But we haven't seen one, have we?
We haven't seen one because we haven't approved this agreement yet, Councilor Nero. We're not operating in accord with this agreement.
Well, we were, on the previous agreement, there was a CPI worked into it as well.
Yeah, but
We
so
never hit.
we'll ask the CEO that. What I think Councilor Nero is suggesting here is that there was never a CPI adjustment on the previous agreement. I don't recall the previous agreement having a CPI adjustment as much as it had annual rates and what the rate would be every year. And the rate escalated quite a bit every year. And we collected the rate in accord with that agreement as it escalated.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero and to yourself, that is correct. At one time, the rate was quite a bit below what city residents pay on a per household basis. The old agreement sought to get that to parity and had significant increases along the way. Essentially, we got to the point where Prince sought another option, which was through the OPP, got pricing for that, which would have been below what we were escalating it to. I really think you have to look at it this way. We don't break down our cost per household by where the household is in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. So we break down the cost of policing. That's the cost of policing for an urban city like Sault Ste. Marie, and it is higher than a rural area like Prince. What you have to do within the city. And we break down the cost of providing city policing throughout the community as a whole. We don't differentiate between urban area and rural area. But we have to look at this in the vein that the calls for Prince and the service offered to Prince is at the same level as what we do out in the rural areas. It's not the same as the level of service we provide, let's say, in downtown Sault Ste. Marie, or the more heavily built up urban areas. There also isn't the same level of commercial real estate in Prince that there is in Sault Ste. Marie. In essence, what you're looking at is there'll be no incremental cost increase by providing the service to Brent, but there'll be no incremental cost savings if we don't provide the cost. So where this agreement is fair to the taxpayer of Sault Ste. Marie is that it gives you a net revenue source starting at $175,000 a year that, if this agreement wasn't approved, would have to be borne by the taxpayers of Sault Ste. Marie.
I'm just going to close, and I'm going to give other councillors a chance to get in on this because I'm sure you have a list. My closing comment would be that I understand that. I don't want to lose the 175. Last time this came around, I believe I argued the case that Prince should be paying the same per capita as taxpayers are paying in the city. I've since dropped away from that because I understand where the police chief is coming from and where yourself is coming from, Mr. CAO. But the fact remains that if we have an agreement based on a CPI and our costs for police services go up every year and that CPI doesn't go up every year, then I don't think we're keeping up with what we should be charging for police services. Those are my comments, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, do we have any other councillors that want to comment on 6.1 or have questions about 6.1? Councillor Gardy. So Councillor Gardy's mic, please. Go ahead, Councillor Gardy. Oh, so Madison, you had Councillor Gardy unmuted and then you.
I'm good. Thank you. So thanks, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, this question is either to you or to, as chair of the police board, which I believe you are, and or the chief. You referenced that, there's thought that there's value to us and there's value to Prince. I appreciate that there's value to Prince. There's no question. So can you just break it down, like in terms of value? Or like we're making money off this deal? Yes or no?
Well, look, I can't tell you that we're making money off of it. I could tell you this, because these are discussions we've had at the Police Service Board. I can tell you if we didn't have this contract, we do not reduce our service at all in Sault Ste. Marie. So like if we don't have this $175,000 contract, it doesn't mean we need less admin staff there or less officers there. So like there's revenue coming in to the police services that's not coming in from our tax base, and it's not adding significantly to the cost of police services. I can't tell you what the cost is, but the chief has said there's 80 calls per year. And you know, those aren't significant calls that take a lot of time, but there is a risk of that. If there's a major crime out in Prince, like then we would have to dedicate the resources to deal with that major crime.
And that's where I was going with this, Mr. Mayor. Like, you know, the exception would be if there were a serious crime, which would we would have to apply man hours and overtime, and you know, significant crime can get quite costly. We're aware of that. So that's the only caveat I had, and I wanted to bring forward. Thanks.
If there's a serious crime, we could eat through that 175 pretty quickly.
That's right.
Look, you know, we're all trying our best to keep our own taxes down, and one of the ways we keep our own taxes down is we try and find tax-based revenue. We're doing that over at the PUC, and you see that we're doing that over the PUC, and we're trying to do that in different places. And frankly, we're trying to do that here. And outside of principle, and we can look at this a bunch of different ways, it doesn't cost us $175,000 to provide policing services to Prince. So I don't see how our taxpayers are treated unfairly. If we don't provide those services and get that $175,000, that $175,000 will show up in the levy. So like that will go on the levy, and that will be $175,000 more the folks in City of Sault Ste. Marie pay. So you know,
I get it.
To me, it's a pretty simple decision, and I trust the chief's judgment. The chief operates the service. The chief is of the opinion that this is the right thing to do. I think it's the right thing to do also from the relationship perspective. Prince is our neighbor. We have a good relationship with them, and we've historically provided services to them. I don't see any problem with doing it on a going forward basis. I agree with Councillor Nero. We should ensure that we can adjust it on an annual basis, and that this does have a CPI adjustment. The only way that it would get into Councillor Nero's concern if the consumer price index dropped and we went into a negative position. I don't see that happening. But to me, I support the chief's desire to move forward with this. I think as he does, it's the right thing to do, and I support it completely.
And the only final thing that I would say, Mr. Mayor, is to kind of echo something that the chief mentioned, is that, you know, we're in a position just from, you know, location to provide some easier service, maybe, if you will, to Prince than the OPP. And I think, you know, a safer Prince is a safer Sault Ste. Marie. So thanks very much.
But you raise a good point, Councillor Gardy. A major crime out there would be expensive. Any other comments or questions from councillors? Seeing none, can we have a vote on this matter? All in favor of, all in favor? You can see your hands.
There is no motion for it because there's a bylaw, but I can read the resolution for the bylaw now that we're on it.
Please read the resolution for the bylaw.
I have a motion by Councillors Booney and Hilsinger resolved that bylaw 2020-115 being a bylaw to authorize the execution of the agreement between the city and the corporation of the township of Prince for the provision of police services be passed in open council this 25th day of May 2020. And that should be opening for your vote.
It is. So all in favor, so the public knows how we're voting. Councillor Dufour, I haven't seen your hand. Opposed? Okay, very good. So the resolution passes. Thank you, Chief. You don't have to stay on the line if you have better things to do.
Then we go to agenda item 6.6, additional dog park. A motion by Councillors Burney and Shoemaker resolved that the report of the Manager of Recreation and Culture dated May 25, 2020 concerning additional dog park be received and that staff be authorized to begin community consultation.
So look, Council, I pulled this, so I'll speak to it, and then I don't want to spend too much time on it, and you guys can make your decisions as you see fit. I don't support staff's recommendation at this time to move forward with this. I don't want to see staff invest any additional time or resources or energy into canvassing this. We've opened up a dog park. I think it's working well. I think people appreciated it. As we pointed out tonight, there's 85 parks in this city. And people are welcome to walk their dogs through any of those parks on a leash. A lot of people in this city recreate, outside of the city boundaries and bring their dogs different places. Where we are right now, what we're doing, what we're having to deal with, all the different things we're focused on, I don't see sending staff to engage in any kind of consultations to determine about spending the time and the money and the energy and the resources into setting up another dog park. We're trying our best to keep our taxes down. We're trying to shrink our footprint more or less. And if anything, we probably have more park space than we need. And, although it might be ideal to have more than one dog park, I don't see it as an important thing at this point in our community's time. And just for that point, I'm going to vote against this resolution, or I'm going to vote against this staff report because I don't want to see staff investing any more time or energy in this. If council sees differently, I respect council's decision. And if this passes, staff will move forward with it. I just wanted to make sure it was separated so I could just get those comments on the record and I could vote against it. Any other comments on that, Councillor Shoemaker?
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Shoemaker, then Councillor Hollingsworth.
I didn't realize that I was the mover or the seconder. I'm not sure, but just for
courtesy.
Yeah. Yes, courtesy. But I'd like to withdraw my name as the person who put that forward.
Okay, so Councillor, can the deputy clerk put someone else on that report?
Councillor Hilsinger is the courtesy for me. Can I add you as the seconder, Councillor Hilsinger?
Yes, you may.
Okay, so Councillor Hollingsworth, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, originally it was my resolution, I believe.
It was. So
I'm surprised I'm not on the resolution, but I interrupted Hilsinger, sorry.
No, so when the reports come back, staff has a process whereby they just use courtesy movers and seconders. So it's a staff report, so it just goes into the normal channels. That's why you didn't show on it, but there's no other reason. It's just the common use. And Councillor Shoemaker asked to be removed from it, so Councillor Hilsinger is now on it as a courtesy mover.
Okay.
Did you want to speak to it?
Yes, I would like to. I just have a few questions. First question to you, to Tom Vare. Mr. Vare, would you consider that this is satisfying one of the pillars that's in our strategic plan, such as quality of life? Would you suggest that it does basically achieve this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker. I think, I wouldn't want to pin.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Councillor Hollingsworth, apologies. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I wouldn't want to pin this down to a single dog park as to a quality of life issue. Obviously, be a range of issues, and then we'd have to look at the mix of amenities in the current dog park we have in the community.
Okay, so you're saying that this is not part of a quality of life and would not be part of that definition that you have been sharing with us for the last year. This would not add to the quality of life.
I don't think in fairness, I don't think he's saying that. I don't think I think what he's saying is he just wouldn't kind of identify it just singularly that way, but he's not saying park space isn't a quality of life issue.
Okay, let me rephrase the question. Do other communities throughout Ontario and Canada have more than one dog park to our similar size of approximately 75,000 in population? Do they? Yes or no?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I don't have the stats in front of me. I would assume there are others that have multiple dog parks of our size, but I don't have the numbers.
Okay. My next question maybe is Virginia McLeod on the phone?
Virginia McLeod is on, and she's unmuted, so go ahead.
Ms. McLeod? The parks
Yes.
that you're suggesting, you have not finalized, obviously, the location. You're just asking for public input. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. Yes, the committee wanted to get a pulse to see what the need was out in the community. We don't have a locally organized group. The LOL Dogs, which is the leash-free dogs group, has since folded. So we don't necessarily have a direct connection to the dog owners. So that's why we thought getting a community pulse was the best course of action to see if there was actually a need.
Okay. And the suggested areas, are they in residential areas that people can walk to by foot without having to use their car, hence leaving the car home and reducing pollution? Are these in residential areas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. Yes, the two parks are located within walking distance to a particular area, as well as the proposal to look at possibly using the seasonal use of boarded rinks in William Merrifield location, as well as Anna McRae, because the cost to do those would be minimal. The boarding is already up, so we wanted to explore that opportunity as well.
Okay, so because the boarding's already up, the additional fencing, additional operation piece would not really play a factor in this because we are using existing space. And it's my understanding people are already using this anyway, so why not make it official? Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I believe Travis Reed is on the line. So from an operational standpoint, I'll let Travis comment, or Susan Hamilton Beach. My understanding is it would be minimal to add the additional gates in or create some type of barrier to allow access into the boarded rinks, but Travis should speak to the operational costs associated with that.
Okay, Mr. Reed?
Could we have, what was the question again, for clarity?
Near the boarded park, the ones that already have the boards up, what type of additional cost would that be, knowing that the boards already exist in the season?
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. We're talking about the rink boarded sites, the outdoor rink boards, I believe. To put up some sort of gate mechanism would be relatively inexpensive. We're talking probably under $1,000 to do the three boarded sites.
Okay, thank you. Going back to, I just have 4 other questions. Going back to you, Ms. Virginia.
Ms. McLeod?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, you mentioned that these areas that you're suggesting are close to the residential areas. I believe that the one in the East End is close to some social housing. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'd have to take a look at, but I believe there is some housing that is located in the East End, yes, near that location that we proposed.
Okay, so there would be a benefit because, again, it's residential area. People walk, bike ride quite often in that area. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, the existing dog park, is that in partnership with the Humane Society?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. No, it's city operated. We did work and speak with the Humane Society through the process of developing the original dog park. But it is our park staff that take care of the maintenance and oversight of the area.
Okay. Out of curiosity, have you explored a partnership with the Humane Society with these potential new parks, that there could be a partnership there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, we haven't approached the Humane Society. The original location provided some easy access and close proximity to the Humane Society, but I don't know if their staffing complement would allow for any additional support in other locations that aren't adjacent to their current facility.
Okay. And 2 other questions. I believe currently one of the locations you're suggesting already has a fence, or at least the area is already fenced in, so hence we may not have to provide a new fence and so forth?
Again, to Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, the one location in Elliott Field area, there's currently a soccer field that has fencing on two sides. It's currently not utilized by soccer with the reconfiguration of the different fields at Strathclair, and is kind of being used right now for a lot of dog owners because it is got some natural barriers and fencing, but would require fencing on two sides.
Okay, very helpful. Thank you. And just two other questions for you. With regards to going back to the residential and so forth, and I know and we appreciate that you have many projects on your portfolio. Up to this point, out of your entire portfolio, what percentage of your time have you dedicated yourself to this particular piece? Would you say it's about 5% or less? Less than 10% of your entire portfolio you're responsible for, the added work?
For you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I'm not sure because this came under also with our Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, so it's one piece. It is a small percentage of the overall portfolio up until this point. Again, when you get into capital development, it does start to take more time, but yeah, I'm not not too sure.
Yeah, that's very helpful. That clarifies that this is also right just under the whole umbrella of the park. So thank you. And one last question to our mayor. Mr. Mayor, your worship, do you own a dog?
I do.
You own a dog, and you allow it to exercise off the leash?
No, it's a very large dog, and I never let her off the leash.
And so, okay.
Well, sorry, to be honest, I have a fenced-in backyard. She's not leashed in my backyard. But if she's not in my backyard, she is categorically, entirely on a leash.
Okay. It's unfortunate not everyone has the privilege of having a fenced-in backyard to allow a dog for proper exercising, when this park would allow pets to be properly exercised and socialized. I do have further comments, but I'll leave that into the comment section. Thank you.
Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my question first is procedurally. If we don't approve this tonight, does this just die, or and I agree, maybe this is not the best time to have staff looking at this, but would it come back at a later time?
No, not unless it was brought back. If it voted down tonight, it dies. If there's a motion to defer it to a different time period, then it would come back again at that time period. But it would just die, and it could be brought back at any time by any councillors who are interested in canvassing or talking about dog parks.
Yeah. And I guess I can see both sides on this. I do sit on PRAC. I guess question for Ms. McLeod. So far, if we were to carry through on this, the committee has already done the most part of the work that they wanted to look at. The consultation process, I see through the report tonight, it's ready to go online. After that, would we not be in a position just to complete the report and bring it back to PRAC and council? So I'm trying to get an understanding of how much more work there is to do on this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, we do have the survey completed, and we did attach it to the report. There might be a couple minor modifications, but the survey is there. It would be ready to be released. The time consumer would be preparing the mail-out list for the 4 locations proposed to make sure that we do solicit feedback from each of the residents that are living within the radius of those proposed locations, and then compiling the results for the report back. So we do have, with SurveyMonkey, they do have a tool that allows you to concisely do the feedback. It would just be the individual comments that may come from the property owners that are adjacent to those properties.
From the mailouts.
Correct.
Right, that's all I have. Thank you, Ms. McLeod. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So do any councilors have any other questions on this? Councilor Gardy, please have a Councilor Gardy's mic. Councilor Gardy, we don't have, Madison doesn't have your mic on yet, Councilor Gardy. There you
Okay,
go.
I'm good. Thank you. Just so I'm clear, the William Merrifield site, through you, Mr. Mayor, to maybe Mr. Reed or Virginia, that would encompass the area inside of the rink boards?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Gardy. Yes, that's correct. We looked at how we could take existing infrastructure and look at ways to repurpose it for additional uses. So those two boarded rinks came to the forefront as options at minimal cost to look at providing options for dog owners.
Thank you. Couple things. A few things. One is in terms of, wanting to do something cost effectively, I get it. I don't think anybody with a dog that's rather athletic or on the larger side of things would find the fenced in area of a boarded outdoor rink sufficient for space, especially if there's a number of dogs there. That's just my opinion. Secondly, I also think that if we move down the road even a bit tonight, we start getting people's hopes up. I think, it's something we should revisit. I would be supportive of it post-pandemic. At this point, as of right now, I am not going to support it, but I would support it if it were to come back to us a little while in the future. Thanks.
Any other councilors or questions? Seeing none, Councillor Hollingsworth, you wanted to make some comments?
Yeah, just some closing comments. So I hope that council around this table will just let the public decide through this survey, which means the survey is basically 99% done. Just let the survey go out and ask the public. And please consider just coming back with the information. It really, truly is the quality of life. It allows people in the residential areas to walk without using a car to a dog park. The benefit is basically socialization. The benefit is exercise for the dog owner and the dog. Also, it encourages proper dog handling. And the big piece is that all walks of life in these areas that can contribute and enjoy the dog park. Also, I hope staff will consider maybe going out and looking for a sponsor in the community that may help offset the cost, which I know there'd be two companies that would be happy to help out. And so please consider for the quality of life, which does have a dotted line to one of our pillars, would be something that I would ask all councillors to consider. Thank you.
So I see no more comments or questions on this, council. I'm not going to repeat myself. I frankly think that we have and staff have already spent too much time on this. If you see fit to tell them to spend more on it, that's your decision. So, Madam Clerk, have you read the resolution?
I have, and the vote is open for voting.
So for public's benefit, all in favor, can I see hands? Opposed? Councilor Dufour, I didn't get what you were doing there. Okay. So it fails.
I don't have Councillor Gardy.
Councilor Gardy, can you cast your vote on E-Scribe, please?
And I don't have Councillor Hollingsworth.
She's in favor. Councillor Hollingsworth, can you cast your vote on E-Scribe, please?
No, I can't.
Okay, so can you mark Councillor Hollingsworth in favor?
So it's a tied vote, so it fails.
Okay, so that brings us out of consent, and now we're on 7. Council, what we're going to do is we're going to give it to the CAO. We're going to go through the reports. After each report or presentation, you can answer questions. And then once you're done with your questions and all the respective reports, we can go into committee of the whole where we could have a more informal discussion. Early on in COVID, we gave everybody a chance to speak at the beginning of a meeting when the crisis originally hit. At that time, I said we would look for a mechanism to get back to and give you more chance to have input. This is really an opportunity for me to listen and for senior staff to listen. You've had a number of materials given to you and presented to you. You'll have more materials presented to you now, and you'll have the reports, and the public has the reports. And then when we go into committee of the whole, we just want to hear what you think. We want to take some guidance and direction from you and understand how you're feeling about things and what you think we could be doing or should be doing, considering the context of what we are doing. I want to just express my appreciation and gratitude to staff who I think have done a lot of very good work throughout this crisis. And I want to recognize again a lot of our community partners who I think have responded to this crisis well. And I think as a community, we've really worked well together collaboratively. And I think some of the results show that. And I think some of the work in front of you tonight shows that. So what we'll do is we'll pass it to the CEO. He'll give some direction and guidance throughout the reports, and then we can ask questions. And once we're done questions, we'll go in the committee of the whole, and I'll give all of you a chance to say your piece. Any discussion you want to have resulting from that, we'll listen to you, and then we'll move out of the committee of the whole, and we'll proceed from there. So, Mr. CEO, with that context, I'll pass it to you.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as we've done in the past with our COVID-related updates, we've grouped them together for sake of ease of discussion. I will go through a short slide deck just touching on the general update and a couple of items from the CFO Treasurer's report on financial impact. Mr. Ver has a slide deck as well regarding more our economic development type and financial responses to COVID through his area. He also touches on where we are going overall. It's a strategy there. As you know, we are evolving economic development and tourism development through our new way of handling that. I'll go through my presentation. Mr. Bear will go through his. You'll be free to ask us questions on our presentations or the CFO Treasurer questions on her report. Once you are through the questions, these are information reports, so they do not need to be there's no actionable items to be voted on. We will then, as the mayor pointed out, go into committee of the whole to have a more broad discussion on things. So I will start things with my presentation. We'll just give it a moment to get up. Okay, and we'll go to the first slide. So as the report notes, we continue to have the lowest prevalence of positive cases in Northern Ontario, and Northern Ontario itself is far lower than most areas in Southern Ontario. That's really good news for us. The community continues to respond well to complying with both provincial orders and Algoma public health recommendations. However, this will be more challenging as we enter the later spring and summer, as people, quite frankly, are social creatures, and with the good weather, they want to be more active, and they are. It has been challenging being locked in there, not a total lockdown, but having restrictions on their activities. As the mayor noted, though, it's important to keep complying with recommendations, and that is the wearing of face masks if you can't physically distance, and the need to physically distance and to keep our interactions with others as to a minimum as possible. We do know that there is community spread out there in our community that isn't tracked. We have had some of our positive cases that we can't pin down where they had the contact and they caught it. So we need to keep our guard up, and we can't be complacent in dealing with these measures. For the corporation itself, our public closures are continued, but there is starting to be limited reopening of some facilities and services. As we do this, our reopening is guided by provincial orders, which allow us to reopen certain things, but we have operational constraints. We have to assess the community need, and we know that the desire by the community for services needs to be balanced off with what our current operational constraints are. And we also have to keep an eye for community health and look at our facilities and assess how we can monitor their use and how we can monitor the community abiding by the recommendations of Algoma Public Health. The services reopening now include our marina, just the Bellevue Marina for now. That is our residential marina, not the transient marina at Bonder. Also our tennis and pickleball courts, pump track, skateboard park, off-leash dog area, and disc golf. And reopening soon at the end of this week would be ball diamonds and soccer fields for casual use only. There can be no team play. Anyone using them still needs to observe physical distancing unless they are a family unit, of course, and since they live together, they can be a little closer together and do the activity. The staff implications in all of this, we have started to recall some of our laid off staff as we've had to address opening some of these areas. The redeployment that we have done does continue in some areas, but we are returning some redeployed staff to regular duties in others. We are returning some of our staff who have been working remotely to the workplace in stages so that we can prepare for limited public interaction as we move towards further reopening measures. We do also have to re-educate these staff, many of who have been absent working remotely for the entire pandemic, to new workplace health and safety measures that we have in our various work sites, including the Civic Center. And that means being able to physically distance from each other, staff, as we do our job, and increased cleaning protocols and things to watch for. Summer student employment is underway, but as mentioned before, it will be at a reduced level this year. As the CFO Treasurer's report on financial impacts to the end of May reports, the net operating budget impact is $996,740. This is a lower number than, frankly, staff expected, but as we add everything up, this is where we sit. So that is, while it is a large number, it is a bit of good news for us in that it wasn't greater than that. I would note from the report where it talks about interim taxes, what you see as a budget impact right now is what we forego in interest and penalty revenue that we would normally get. The report does note that the interim taxes that weren't paid this year is essentially double from what we saw in 2019, but it also notes that 3/4 of that increase is limited to 50 non-residential accounts. Really what we see when we see that pattern, we have 50 non-residential accounts that are still outstanding, and that can basically be summed up in 3 streams. One, there will be commercial and industrial accounts that can't pay right now. So they are withholding the taxes, but they will come later. 2, there will be businesses that can pay, but they wish to preserve their liquidity right now. We're all unsure of how long this will go, so they choose to take the measures that council has given them by waiving the interest and penalties, and they're preserving their liquidity for now. The third element will be businesses that could pay right now, but they choose not to because, like a good business owner, they will not pay until they have to. We need to do a little more work on analyzing how many of those fall into the various groups. But it is important to note that the CFO notes in her report, we will work in the end with individual accounts that cannot pay to come up with plans of how they can pay us over time. The report also notes that the reserves contribution impact is a negative 146,000 so far, and most of that is to do with revenue received from the municipal accommodations tax. The report does note that this is fine for the operations in tourism, that we are fine and still operating with what we've received in. What you will see impacted is money that would be put towards reserves and used in the Tourism Development Fund. So we will see an impact on there. It's also important to note that the interest being waived on the municipal accommodations tax and our accounts receivable, aside from taxes, does expire at the end of June. So you can expect a report coming to you in June as to whether we should extend that or not. The report also notes our capital funding impact so far is estimated at $2 million, and that is as a result of waiving the sewer surcharge for those 2 months. It's important to note that the waiving of that money and the reduction in going towards the sewer surcharge capital account will be dealt with near the end with short-term borrowing in the end once we get to building the facilities that are needed and we see what kind of tender pricing is in there. We had always determined that there would be a certain amount of short-term borrowing needed for those projects, so this will just increase that need potentially once we get down the road. Over to our last slide. I had reported on capital projects to you at the previous meeting. As you know, the 2020 resurfacing program is on tonight. We are preparing for anticipated stimulus funding. We've got there's preparations underway, and a report will come to you for the next meeting. That is a typo, it's June 8th, our next council meeting. The stimulus programs are expected to be more targeted than in the past and more specific. We are trying to get our preparations together to bring to you on June 8th so that you may pre-approve some of the items so that if it comes to pass that there is stimulus funding available and streams open up, we can react quickly, because we have been advised that the quicker we can react, the more likely it is that we may be able to receive the funding. With that, that ends my presentation. We'll turn it over to Mr. Bear for his presentation, and then you'll be able to ask questions on either of these presentations or the CFO Treasurer's report.
So I see hands going up. Mr. CAO, so should we deal with your report now and take questions in your report now and then move on to Tom?
Certainly, Mr. Mayor, if we've got hands going up, then it'll probably be more effective to deal with them now.
So I've got Councillor Hollingsworth, then Councillor Nero, then Councillor Bruni, then Councillor Gardy.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Mr. Malcolm White. You commented briefly on the testing. Can you confirm if all the long-term homes in our community have gone through testing?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, what I can confirm to you, I know the long-term care homes have all been tested, including the patients, the staff, and those that have been into the homes to provide other services. The next step was to do the retirement homes. I'm not sure where they are in that process right now.
Okay, thank you. I just have a few other questions. You also commented that you're bringing staff back through, some training, of course, and so forth. It's my understanding, obviously, the world has changed, the world is changing, and that companies such as Shopify is now encouraging staff to stay at home. Basically, they're saying most Shopify employees won't return to office after the pandemic. And having said this, there's an opportunity for companies and us to re-engineer. Are you looking at re-engineering City Hall that you may not have all staff come back? And if they don't come back, will you be looking at re-engineering the office space. Other companies, especially University of Toronto, has written a report saying that their space is going to be available because office staff won't be coming back. Can you comment on this, on how do we really have to bring all staff back? Why are we bringing staff back when technology seems to be working?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, we will be looking at all those things. However, our focus right now is on the how we interact with the public and some changes we may have to make at the Civic Centre to accommodate that. I would say that the same trends you see talked about for Southern Ontario and others where they're looking at moving more permanently to remote working are driven by needs that aren't here in Sault Ste. Marie. Primarily, those needs are driven by the commuting time that you get and the amount of time that staff lose in the commute each day going to work and back. We run a fairly lean operation. We've reported that out to council many times before, and it's a very varied operation. We do a lot of different things, so while it may be easier for a company like Spotify, which does a very focused type of provision of service, it may be easier for a company like that than to certainly for us. You have to remember too that probably over half of our staff have been working through the pandemic at their job site. Certainly the areas like public works and engineering, our transit operations, these are operations that have to have feet on the ground at the place where they need to provide the service.
Okay. So it sounds like you are open to the idea of relooking at our staff and possibly those that can use technology that don't have the face-to-face interaction with clients or our constituents. There might be a possibility to adopt some of these new work principles.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, there is. The way I'll characterize it right now, and this is something that many municipalities with a civic center like ours are looking at, there will likely be a need to significantly change how our staff interact with the public for the foreseeable future. We are discussing this right now, and we will likely tie what we want to assess in with a security audit that was planned before the pandemic to be used. In the end, we may see a significant change in the Civic Center as to how people are deployed, and we may be focusing our interactions with the public more through one area. For instance, in the lobby and associated areas, rather than having people roaming throughout the Civic Center. As we look at how that will occur, those type of interactions and how we plan for them will then start to determine where people need to do their work from. And it'll be during those assessments that we can decide whether people need to be here at all or whether we can have some rotating remote working.
Okay, and I have just 3 other questions. I know that before this crisis occurred, you were looking at automation. You were looking at the processes that are manually done. And I believe you were looking at how we can automate some of these to be more efficient. Are you still looking at that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we are. It's been driven more by immediate need right now, and we have made some changes already. We are going ahead with that, but as far as a priority basis, it is addressing the services we need to provide now. Once we get to a more normal state of affairs, we'll turn our minds more to what was delineated in the KPMG study, and we'll be looking to assess those and bring them to council.
Okay, good. And just 2 other questions. You talked about different solutions. Just going into talking about our restaurants and outdoor patios, the Markham Mayor, Frank Scarpati, is looking into enacting a temporary bylaw that would eliminate a cap on the number of patio seats, outdoor patio seats a restaurant can have, which is usually based on indoor seating capacity. John Tory is doing the same, who's the mayor of Toronto, is asking his staff to look at possible ways to expand patios onto streets. So basically, the mayor has asked in Toronto to reimagine the way in which they are using public space and still in a safe manner. First question, do we have a limit on patio seating? How many people can be on our patio presently? Is there a bylaw?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, there are limits right now based on a number of criteria. What I can say regarding patios is that we are actively looking at that right now, how we can provide guidance to those who want to offer patios and still comply with the guidelines on physical distancing, and that there will be a report brought to you at the next meeting of council which outlines how we think we need to change so that we have things ready in time for patio season.
Okay, and with regards to patios, will you be coming back to council to ask us to consider waiving fees? I'm assuming that there's a fee associated when you have a patio. Is that correct? Do we have a fee associated with having a patio, and would we consider waiving these fees?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, we do have a fee, and yes, we are considering what to do with that, and that will be part of the recommendation that's brought to you at the next meeting.
Okay, and thank you. I just want to reiterate that the messaging that you and the mayor have been providing has been well received. My constituents keep on saying that it's well done, and the calls are very informative that you're doing, the conference calls and the customer helpline or the client helpline. So well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. I've been asked to step in as acting mayor and go to Councillor Nero next.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor. Mr. White, your second last page of your presentation, financial impact to May 31st. I just wanted to confirm the lines operating budget impact and reserves contribution impact, those would directly, if nothing changed from today or the end of May 31st going forward, those two lines would directly impact our 2020 budget. The capital funding impact, the $2 million from the sewer surcharge, we wouldn't be looking at an impact until the end of 2021, where we would not be needing that revenue. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Acting Mayor, to Councillor Nero. That's correct. We would not require that funding until later on down the road. I don't know exactly when, and I'll let the CFO Treasurer or the Director of Engineering pipe in on that. But you are correct. That capital funding impact is not something that is as imminent as the operating budget impact or the reserves contribution.
Okay. And I think that's the answer I was looking for. So my second question, if I may, Mr. Acting Mayor, Mr. CAO, have there been any indications yet of any help coming to municipalities from the provincial or federal government?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero. We've started to see some signs, and you saw that with the approval of the Connecting Link funding for Trunk Road. We are starting to see them look at some more capital or stimulus type funding. As far as general relief, certainly municipalities across Canada have been getting the message to their various provincial and the federal governments that they require it. It's especially associated around the operation of transit operations because every urban area that has a transit operation has had a severe impact. And usually it's the greatest financial impact. As of yet, we don't have an indication from the federal and provincial government on general relief or relief for that specific area. But I think we have to allow some time for that to occur. We're still dealing with the pandemic. Their focus still is very much on the health of the country and the provinces. So I think we need to allow them a little more time to assess where they are and what resources they're going to require.
Okay, fair enough. And just my last question would be, in your next report, I guess, and I understand this is a difficult thing to do, but to project bringing out the operating budget impact from where we are today, I guess there's too many variables to give us some sort of idea where we would be next quarter.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, we are trying to refine that, but it is very difficult to answer right now because we don't know where we are going in the framework for reopening the province. So obviously, as we reopen things, we start to incur costs that we don't have right now. And as things get reopened, we may start to incur more expenses. So it's difficult to forecast. That being said, we recognize that council and indeed ourselves would like some more clarity there, and we will work more towards refining that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Acting Mayor, or Mr. Mayor. I see you both now, so I'm not sure who's in the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bruni, you're next. I can have Councillor Bruni, please. Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions to Mr. White. Mr. White, do we have any authority to open any facilities with, of course, Algoma Public Health's approval, or are we strictly following the provincial guidelines?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we're doing both right now. The province has closed certain facilities, such as recreational facilities, and they can only be reopened through relaxing of the orders put in place by the province. In other areas, we have closed to the public. So an example of that would be the Civic Center. We do allow a very limited access by appointment only for some things that are needed by the public. But as we relax things and open up more to the public for the Civic Center, that would be more under our control.
Regarding your staff, do you have a time period when say all staff will be returning to the Civic Center, or the Public Works Office, Transit Office, etc.? Is there a time period for this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, there is not a defined time period. We're taking it as it goes. We don't want to move too quickly. So what we have said is we're starting to bring staff back to those types of locations so that we can get them acclimatized to the workplace again, get them to prepare for how we're going to handle public interaction in our next mode, which I described to staff as an intermediate mode of business. Right now, we have the criteria that any area is never supposed to have more than 1/3 of its staff at the work site at any one time in the Civic Center. And that's to make sure we get people educated and acclimatized to our new normal in interacting with each other. We will move forward pretty much similar to how the province is moving forward, carefully, and we'll have to continually assess how things are moving. Obviously, we want to get to more open arrangement as we can, but we want to be very careful on how we do so.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, the customer helpline, it's still operating. Is it at regular hours, or has the manpower been reduced, or is it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we have reduced the community helpline somewhat. We stopped having it open for weekend use, and that was directly related to the call volumes we are experiencing. It is, however, still open Monday to Friday, 8:30 to 4:30. We don't need as many staff handling it as we did originally because the call volume has dropped significantly, but we are still, it is still operating. And if we started to see a spike in calls again, we would staff it up appropriately.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, next I have Councillor Gardy. Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you to CAO White. Mr. White, you kind of went over it, but at the end of your update, you mentioned the stimulus funding is expected, and it's expected to be more targeted in the past. Could you just provide a little bit more clarity or reiterate that one more time for me, please?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy. Most of you remember the stimulus program that came out of the financial crisis we faced in 2008 and 2009, where there was a very broad stimulus program put out by the federal and provincial governments. And it resulted in often some very large projects being done. Both the provincial and federal governments have a lot more calls on their money this time. They've had to direct it in many ways. So we understand that the programs that come out will be smaller and more targeted than what we saw before. And they will look at doing things like, well, they've already done in some cases, expanded the envelope a little bit of what's eligible under existing programs. But it will be carefully done. So likewise, staff and council will need to be very careful about what we've prepared for and what we expect to get.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, broadly speaking to you, Mr. White, you foresee that we'll have projects that would meet a variety of criteria should they come out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Gardy, yes, with the report that we will bring you next meeting, we will try and have, we've got a good idea of where the potential stimulus dollars will be available. So we will outline that in the report. We'll outline what we have, what ideas we have to meet those. We also have to provide you with the information of what funding we have in place right now to meet the city's component of the funding, because obviously we're trying to be careful. The pandemic is affecting us financially, and it's not just open season on stimulus funding.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Scott next on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. White. My question is, it's just around like the park opening and parks opening rather. So I believe the province gave us direction that the parks could be open. Is there a certain order that we're looking to open them in? Is there a certain criteria? I know I've received a couple calls from residents in Ward 5 about Point de Chene Park, wanting to know whether or not it was officially open, if it had planned to be officially open, just for people to get out and walk and try to respect social distancing. Obviously, there's the concern that it could be something that like what happened in Toronto, but I would think that we're a little bit more responsible here. So I was hoping you could speak to that.
Yeah.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott. Parks were not closed under a provincial order, but certain facilities in them were closed by provincial order. And so something like playground equipment was and remains closed through provincial order. Some municipalities took the step of closing their parks entirely. We chose not to do that because we recognize that they are green spaces and people can use them to walk through and still observe physical distancing, as long as they didn't use the facilities within the parks. What we've started to see now is a gradual reopening of that. So the moves by the province to say you could start opening up facilities like tennis courts, like our disc golf and those sorts of things, as long as you continue to comply by physical distancing. So we've been able to do that. Specifically for the Point de Chene Day Park, beaches are still closed by the province, and they were closed by the provincial order. So in that case, we're not opening the day use area at Point de Chêne because the beach is still closed. Should the province come through and relax that order and open up the beaches, then we can look at it, but we will use the same criteria that I referred to in the first part of my presentation, where when the province tells us we can reopen something, we do consider our operational constraints. We consider the community need or desire by the community for that area. And we do consider community health. So we take all of those into account when we're making decisions on that.
Okay. That was everything that I had on that. Thank you very much for the thorough answer.
Okay, so I don't have anybody else on a list here for questions for the CEO. So seeing nobody, we can move on to Mr. Ver's report. Mr. Ver, you had a presentation?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Go ahead.
So the presentation tonight is a high-level overview of some of the work we're doing for economic development and COVID business recovery. It is 20 slides long, and I know council had it in their package, so I'm not going to speak to every bullet point, and we'll go through fairly quickly. Key point is that we do want to go out and are going out to talk to community stakeholders to refine this plan. So while this is high level, it will come back to council with input from other groups in the community and more detail in the future. And those other groups would include the Community Development Roundtable, Economic Development Corporation Board, our Tourism Sault Ste. Marie Board, the Innovation Center, post-secondary institutions, Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Association, and others. And next slide, please. So we had been working to update our economic development strategy as we shifted the model and brought the economic development and tourism staff in-house. And the outbreak has obviously had a significant impact to local businesses. And most pundits would agree is going to have an impact going forward on the economy. And so certainly we want a thoughtful and strategic approach. And I think the community is in good shape in this regard because we do have the work that was completed through the Future SSM project as a baseline to help us move forward. Next slide, please. So first off, we wanted to acknowledge the serious health consequences of COVID-19 and it's affecting people around the world and across Canada. Locally, we did a survey to look at the business impact with the Algoma Workforce Investment Corporation. And of the respondents, 37% indicated this could put their business, put them out of business, and 44% indicated it would significantly impact their financials. Of the 360 that responded to the question about reduction of their workforce, 40% had reduced their workforce as a result of COVID. So there's no doubt it's had a significant impact locally. And certain sectors have been hit exceptionally hard when you think of tourism and hospitality, airlines, etc. Next slide, please. On the positive side, certainly as a community, we've seen a lot of organizations and individuals rallying together and sharing resources and information. And we believe the community will need to apply this camaraderie and spirit to help us recover moving forward. Next slide. So a number of actions have been taken by City Council and by staff since the outbreak of the pandemic. And I don't have to tell council about your motions to waive the interest, suspending collection of the municipal accommodations tax, waiving interest and penalty provisions for the MAT, and the interest on accounts receivable as well. Next slide. And our economic development and tourism teams have undertaken a number of actions to support the businesses, and I won't read through all of these. I would like to acknowledge our team, though. It was interesting, the Ontario BIA Association in their regular newsletter, they came out with a comment, and they had said that it's hard to sift through the resources and find ones that fit but worth doing. And the resource from Sault Ste. Marie is chock full of excellent suggestions, and one of the best, most comprehensive Ontario ones that they have come across. So I want to recognize our team. They've been working hard to try and put the resources together, make sure our businesses are informed about all the funding support programs, and doing direct support and working with companies to make sure they're taking advantage of any support that they can during this difficult time. Next slide, please. And certainly, we want to convey that, it hasn't been business as usual. We've been adjusting our activities and adjusting the way we are performing our duties given the COVID situation. So in the support side, we're working closely with our local businesses to help them obtain funding support. As I mentioned, we're looking at opportunities for retraining and to support employment. If people are laid off from their positions and doesn't look like they can get back to their employer. And as Malcolm just mentioned, looking at stimulus funding to support our businesses and capital projects. And then making changes along the way, undertaking a campaign now to attract remote workers and companies to our community. There may be those given a taste of working from home and looking for a different lifestyle, will be looking for places like Sault Ste. Marie to relocate and work from. Pivoting our tourism attraction and promotion efforts to focus on in-province travel and local travel. Once people are able to travel, we're gearing up for those types of activities. Also looking at our product development activities and the mix of projects that we have to support the tourism industry going forward, and adjusting this economic development strategy and focus areas, both on short-term, mid-term, and long-term opportunities post the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. Next slide, please. So we'll be essentially focusing on three main areas: technology, education, and tourism. Next slide. These different sectors are complementary, we feel, and there's obviously the jobs and the company attraction with the technology piece, supporting entrepreneurs and research and development. That ties in nicely with the education sector as they produce the talent. Also, significant number of jobs associated with our education sector. Being able to conduct R&D in that environment and work closely with our businesses, and producing entrepreneurs in their own right. And certainly on the tourism side, there's a number of jobs associated with that sector, but it also helps to play a role when we look at people attraction to our community, creating awareness of the lifestyle and the assets that we have in this community. And so we feel these three things are complementary. Next slide. On the technology side, three main focus areas: smart energy and leveraging our alternative energy assets, and the future smart grid project from the PUC. Certainly manufacturing, maintaining our roots in manufacturing, but looking at how that industry is modernizing, the new technologies that are available for manufacturing. The Innovation Center in Algoma Steel had a great IT project they were working on together. So there's lots of opportunities in advanced manufacturing as well. And then just in general, the digital transformation, some of this accelerated by COVID-19 as people look at remote offices and remote workers, as well, looking at industries like lottery and gaming, where we already have a cluster, and how those services are delivered online and effectively delivered to their customers. Next slide. On the education front, working closely with Sault College and Algoma University. And obviously COVID-19 has had an impact on the international students, but we believe long-term education is a growth sector, and there's a number of benefits to the community working with our post-secondary institutions as well as our school boards. On the post-secondary side, we've identified some of the areas of focus for Algoma University and Sault College, and we'll continue to work with them to help grow and advance their institutions in the community. Next slide. On the tourism front, as I mentioned, we've taken a number of steps to pivot to reflect COVID-19 impact. There was an interesting research report put out by McKinsey that looked at, as China opened up the restrictions, who was more likely to travel and what they were doing when they were traveling. And essentially it was younger people that were more open to travel. It was, places within driving distance, and it was often, non-group activities. And we think there are opportunities in our area to bring people up so they can enjoy the wilderness, they can enjoy the outdoors, and take advantage of some of the assets in Sault Ste. Marie as they do their staycations. And, building out and leveraging our world-class assets, looking at our winter sports events and promotion activities, Searchmont, Stokely, snowmobiling, mountain bike trail development, which council is aware of, taking advantage of the Lake Superior coastline in our waterways. We are working with CN on a development of a new strategic plan for the Algoma Canyon Tour Train. And as that activity comes back online, we want to be ready with a renewed service and renewed offerings for clients. Also looking at Indigenous and cultural tourism, and again, collaboration with our post-secondary institutions on this front for both labor and potentially entrepreneurs and succession planning. Next slide, please. We've also looked at the foundational building blocks, and so talent, business support, collaboration, and awareness of our community, and quality of life. Next slide. So on the talent side, I've touched on education and the important role it can play in the collaboration that we anticipate. Also in the future, again, for specific skill sets that we're having difficulty landing, it's important that we continue to keep our immigration pathways open and are able to provide our businesses with the skilled labor that they need. And we also want to look at innovative ways that we can support entrepreneurs at the post-secondary level, using the startup visa program available to our Economic Development Corporation, and also looking at succession and business matchmaking in the future. Next slide. From a business support side, we want to make sure, again, this is some of the block and tackling of economic development, but make sure we've got support and mentors for our businesses and entrepreneurs, make sure they've got the capital and funding that they need to start and grow their businesses, and also make sure as a community we have the infrastructure in place to support businesses and support business development. Next slide. From a collaboration and awareness perspective, looking at collaboration with our First Nations partners and also regional partnerships with our friends in Sioux, Michigan. Obviously the borders are closed now, but in the future we want to re-engage and look at our opportunities as an international trade zone. Youth engagement is very critical, as we've reported to council before, with our future SSM strategy, and definitely we want to continue that work. There's an interesting program called City Studio that we want to launch in the community, which effectively engages students at post-secondary institutions in working on community problems and developing throughout the term solutions and making a presentation to the community with ideas on a number of fronts that are of interest to the municipality and to the business community. We also want to look at how we better promote the community. And this was a recommendation from the future SSM strategy and certainly still holds today as we look at better promoting the quality of life, the lifestyle, and the opportunities here in Sault Ste. Marie. Next slide. And speaking of the quality of life, we don't want to forget the 4 pillars of the future SSM strategy. These are obviously critical to advancing the community in a long-term basis. And so making sure we continue to keep our eye on cultural vitality, downtown revitalization, looking at housing and supporting urban development, growth geared to young professionals, and also looking at jobs and in particular first job opportunities, so that when we have our youth coming through post-secondary institutions, we can provide them with co-ops, placements, internships, and first jobs so that they're more likely to stay in the community. The next slide, please. One of the things we touched on throughout the presentation is this idea of a collaboration center, and we envision this to be a dynamic building that would support community collaboration, incubation type space, co-working space. Also, we heard from the education action team within the future SSM strategy about a place for students to go and receive support, but also get involved in dynamic projects as a part of a youth learning hub. And also we know there's needs in our arts community. So we're looking to build in some of that STEAM, as they call it, activities so that we have the arts engaged in this collaboration center. So lots more details will come forward to council on this, but we wanted to capture that concept in the presentation as something we have been talking to people about. Next slide, please. So this is just an overview of the framework that we talked about with all the different components. Next slide. Obviously, when we come back to council, we will have the detailed metrics, and we want to have SMART objectives for each one of these items. So things that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound, but we would like to get the input from different community partners in order to finalize that and bring it back to council. Next slide. And again, just touching on some of those new initiatives, when we look at company and remote worker attraction to the community, a bit of a reboot on tourism with some of our focus on our assets, the collaboration center, the entrepreneurship support, post-secondary collaboration, and the youth-focused programming. Next slide. So again, it's a high-level overview. I appreciate I went through it fast, but happy to take any questions from councillors if they have any. Thank you.
So before we get into questions, I'll make a list here. I just wanted to acknowledge the work that's been done here. I think you can all see it's substantial, but I think it's really important to circle back to the one point Tom made. Some of the work that was done by his team and certainly the Innovation Center, which has been a great ally and asset throughout this process, is being referred to and used as best practice in the province. And people are being pointed to those resources. So I think we should acknowledge that. It speaks to the quality of our staffing and the quality of their approach to this work. So thank you for that, Tom. So a number of hands went up. I'm going to start with Councillor Hilsinger.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ver. I just have two questions. I noticed that there's nothing in the presentation that you did with regards to anything we should be doing in terms of taking advantage of what's going on in the environment around the world, how things have changed and people are moving around less and traveling less. And while that's a big challenge, it certainly has made us realize what's happening in the world with our air and other things. And so did you consider any of those ideas, or are you thinking about any of those ideas about what we could do differently going forward, or how we could capture and be part of a bigger solution around cleaner air?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hilsinger. There are things that we are considering on that front. And I think I would say when we looked at our, I guess it doesn't fit it exactly, but when we looked at our green and alternative energy bucket that we talked about, we saw activities within there that would take advantage of some of the initial work that the community's already ahead on and how we leverage that moving forward. We are looking at different modes of transportation, different fuel types for our vehicles. We're looking at our transit fleet now. So yes, these are things we're considering.
Okay, I think it would be, globally, everybody in the world should be thinking about how do we take advantage of what's happening right now. And I recall that there were quite a number of suggestions in our strategic planning that we did back in, I'm forgetting now, earlier this year or late last year, that were around more strategy around the environment and what we wanted to do as a community. My second question is, could you provide us with some timing on your slide use that mentioned detailed metrics and SMART goals, et cetera? When do you foresee those things coming forward?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hilsinger. What we're looking at is going out and consulting these groups over the next month. And then what we'd hope to do is come back to council in late August, early September timeframe with the finalized plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, move on to Councillor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Tom, I agree with the mayor. Your presentation and the work of your staff is very impressive. And I was listening and reading your reports, and I'm just struck at how the future Sault Ste. Marie project really has set us up well, given the circumstances, to deal with what we're dealing with. I want to recognize that as well. Ironically, the future Sault Ste. Marie project, if we recall, was born out of the issue we had with Algoma Steel, SR Steel at the time. And through all of that, we have the future Sault Ste. Marie plan, which again has set us up very, very well, I think, in terms of dealing with this. I see a lot of the future Sault Ste. Marie project in this, and that's a good thing. We're able to hit the ground running, perhaps better than other communities can. So I want to acknowledge that, and I think I'm confident that
you know, depending on what the federal and provincial governments come back with in terms of stimulus funding, et cetera, I'm hoping that because of the framework that we've developed here through your group, that there'll be funding for specific projects within our plan, like education, et cetera, that will continue to support the plans that you put forward. I have one question, and that is, there's a push now to see if we can have perhaps people working remotely and making Sault Ste. Marie home again. Have we given any thought, or have we tapped into the Connect Sault Ste. Marie group, many of whom have an interest in Sault Ste. Marie and perhaps would like to come back, and because of the current situation may have an employer or a situation which would afford them the opportunity to come back?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Christian, yes, absolutely. We see that as a really key group that we're going to be able to go out to, both from an attraction perspective, but then also to help amplify our message going forward. And you'll see in the very near future, we're going to have some a campaign going, and we'll have some media presence around that. That I think the team that we've got, the expat group that we've got, can play a significant role in helping us achieve some goals there.
Well, congratulations. I think that what you presented, and it's borne out from the recognition that we've received provincially for the work. Congratulations. I know we've got a big challenge ahead of us. We're certainly not out of the woods, but I'd like to think that we have the framework in place to really attack this as best we can. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Christian. I have Councillor Hollingsworth next.
Thank you. I just want to again echo the same remarks. Excellent work by Tom, your team, and once again, many businesses are out there saying that they feel supported with regards to the calls and the additional information on the websites. So Ms. Hilsinger commented on when are we going to start seeing the results, or when are we going to start seeing the specifics. So that question's been answered. Thank you. I guess my main question is, you mentioned the tour train, and I'm happy to hear that you're working closely with CN to make it sounds like a better tour train once it's up and running again. So I'm under the impression our lease has been renewed with CN, Mr. Bear?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, the lease that the train station has, CN has, sorry, with the train station?
Correct, the train station, but I also was under the impression that they were going to help further with the tour trains itself, or not.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, CN is making investments now in the rolling stock of the train, and we've been working with them on a revised 10-year plan for the tour train, and so we're collaborating quite closely with the tourism team and CN on that project.
Okay, great. That's very positive. Also, Mr. Ver, you commented on immigration. Again, I feel strongly that you and your team and City Hall, they've done a wonderful job in promoting immigration, and especially through the two programs. Will we see in the future, in the near future, your report again showing since the immigration programs have been up and running, how many families have come to Sault Ste. Marie? And out of the families that have come to Sault Ste. Marie, in your report, will we see if they started new businesses, what type of trade or skill have they brought to the city? Will there be a chance that you'll have a report of this type in the future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, yes, I would say we have a number of different programs that we're working on related to immigration, and we will be coming back to council with results from those different programs.
And by chance, do you know approximately when we can see this report? Again, immigration is just so positive for our community.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I would anticipate likely in the fall timeframe we would have a better snapshot that we can bring back to council. Obviously, there's a pause on things during this COVID period, so we'd want to have some consistent months of activity and results there to present.
Okay, just two questions.
Councillor Hollingsworth, can I ask you to look at your you're a bit muffled because you're looking away and you're not in your screen there. So I think it's a bit confusing for people who might be streaming us here.
Yeah, sorry, I'm using my cell phone because I'm having technical difficulties, so I have to use my cell phone. With regards to two other questions, you talked about looking at technology, education, tourism. I believe that you mentioned in the past you looked at healthcare as well, and possibly working closer with our healthcare areas such as the hospital, cancer care center, Dr. Spatafore. Are you still in consultation with our healthcare team?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. Yes, a lot of the interaction of late, the Innovation Center has a program with the AMA, and also working with the post-secondary institutions and their interaction with those groups has been part of the main focus for our activities in the healthcare space.
Okay. When I say post-secondary, that's fantastic, but I'm also looking more like the hospital, such as our Health Hub Cancer Center, where there's a lot of research that we're doing. Are we reaching out to the research that's being done in our Cancer Care Center right now?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. No, that's something we can take away and follow up on. We had, through the Future SSM strategy, discussed healthcare opportunities with some of the different stakeholders, and that's something we can circle around to. Okay.
And a final question with regards to retail. Obviously, we're very concerned about our retail small business owners on Queen Street, Station Mall, up on the Great Northern Road. How have you been reaching out to our retail operators, especially the Station Mall, with helping them with the struggling times?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. I would say a few things. One is related to our direct business support and our community hotline. We are working with businesses directly. Secondly, we did set up the Sue Together website, which we're profiling our local businesses in ways that citizens can patronize their businesses right now, and promoting that site so that people are aware of who's open and you know how they can help support those local businesses now.
Okay, good. And I hope that in the future that there's some more potential opportunity to maybe look at Station Mall and work with the Station Mall groups to see how that can be turned into more of a community hub of some sort. Thank you, Mr. Ver.
Okay, so I don't have anybody else on the list. Anybody else with questions for Mr. Ver? Seeing none, we can move on to 7.1.1.3. Financial impacts of city's COVID-19 response. Does the CFO have a presentation that she'll be doing? I don't think so. I think you just have her report.
Mayor. Mr. Mayor, members of council, she didn't have a specific presentation. I did refer to some of it in my presentation, but certainly if council has any questions on the report, they can do so at this time.
So we have the CFO's report in front of us. So we'll start with Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Ms. Shell. Ms. Shell, if you talk about the permanent revenues that are lost from various areas, if we use a reserve, say for example, the tax stabilization reserve to make up the shortfall in those areas for next year, and those reserves just get replenished based on our reserve policy, which is whenever we have a surplus, then do we forego the potential for a huge impact on the levy in future years, or next year specifically, I suppose?
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, yes, you're correct. If we use the tax stabilization reserve, the whole purpose would be to mitigate any deficit in 2020 that would have to be levied in 2021.
So, and do we have any reserves that get automatically replenished if we deplete them, or is it just however much we use will get built back up depending on what the surplus is?
It really depends on the reserve. The tax stabilization reserve is replenished currently based on any surplus,
or if council designates an amount to put in going forward that they want to use to replenish that. So if you're looking at using that tax stabilization reserve and then over several years replenishing it so that there's a smaller increase over maybe 3 to 5 years, yes, you can do something along that line to replenish it if that's council's desire. But the way it's set up right now, it is just using the surplus any year.
Right. So if we use like $1 million from it, for example, we don't have to replenish that $1 million within any particular specified period of time. It's just however long council deems us to require it to be replenished.
Correct.
Okay. That is my only question. Thank you. Those are my only questions.
Thanks, Councilor Shoemaker. Do we have anybody else on the CFO's report? Councilor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to Michelle. On page 3, you have financial implications of the city's COVID-19 response. You got 100 to 999, 1,000 to 2,099. Can you explain that, please?
On page 3, is that the appendix? Sorry, I don't have the same schedule up. Does it say
I think he's looking at your
assumptions and changes?
I think he's looking at your report. So he's looking at the top of your report of page 3. He's looking for an explanation of that first set of data. Is that correct, Councilor Bruni?
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I see it where it says 100 to 999.
Yes, yes.
That's right.
Yes, that's just where we're looking at the increase in the taxes receivable between May of 2020 and May 31st of 2019. So what we did is an analysis to see where the increase occurred. So as the CAO already stated, approximately 3/4 of the increase of around $4 million related to only 50 tax accounts that were over 20,000. But then we wanted to see if there was a greater impact in the residential area, which would be the lower amounts, obviously. So what we did is we looked at a range of them to see where there's some impact. So of the remaining 25% of the $4 million increase, that's the breakdown by the dollar amount that's receivable. So there's 3,160 tax accounts that owe between $100 and just under 1,000, et cetera. So it does indicate that there's some smaller accounts that are a little more heavily outstanding and seem to be having some difficulty. And that's why, as the CAO indicated, we're going to look and see what happens over the next 2 due dates. And if required, we'll look at a plan to work with these taxpayers that have all of a sudden gotten into an arrears position because of the pandemic and look at a way that we can help them get back on track.
And I probably missed it or forgot about it, but the majority of these people are these, is it businesses or more residential?
The smaller amounts, I didn't go into, I didn't break it down to that level, but typically they would be residential. So the first 2 categories would likely mostly be residential.
So the 3,000 to 499.9 and 5,000 to 19. That's 200.
I would say those would be heavier for commercial.
So that's 283. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
My other question is, if I can pop it up here, it's regarding the reserves funds that you have in your report.
Okay.
If I can't get it up for some, can't bring it up. 1 second. Okay. I notice you have one column, which is probably the second one, target levy.
Target level.
Level. Is this what you're looking for? So for instance, let's self-insurance disability. Your target level 650,000.
Correct.
Our balance right now is 650,000, right?
Correct.
So we won't put any more money in that unless if it goes below the 650.
Yes, if we use it and it goes below the 650, then we would look to putting funds back into that account.
Okay. Not all have a target level in your report here.
No, because each reserve has its own criteria and what it's being used for. For instance, the tax stabilization reserve, we say 5.7 million or 10% of own source revenue, because our own source revenue does change every year. Asbestos abatement, it has a set amount because it's based on what we figure we're going to require. You'll see some of the capital equipment ones are based on what we determine through the asset management plan to in order to fund those assets. So it depends on the use and the type of reserve.
Okay, and then at the very bottom of your report regarding cemetery, industrial park, hospitals, property purchase, etc. That would be page 3 of 3. And at the very bottom. Can you please explain not applicable based upon requirements? So say, for instance, cemetery. So right now in the cemetery fund, reserve fund, we don't have anything in the reserve fund?
There is some money, but it's been committed this year. But you will see with the new mausoleum, as it comes online and the purchases are made, this cemetery reserve fund will replenish again.
Okay.
So that's where, when it means about requirements, it depends on what our requirements are going to be going forward for the cemetery and how we fund it.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have anybody beyond Councillor Bruni. Any other comments from questions from councillors to our CFO? Okay, so seeing none, you have all that information in front of you. You have all of our previous reports from our last meetings leading up to this, and you've had an opportunity to ask those questions. We can go into committee of the whole. I'll leave it to you to kind of we'll go through a process where everybody can have their say and offer some comments to us, and then we'll exit. So,
excuse me, I've got 2 motions on both the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services and the CFO's report, and then I'll read the motion to go into committee of the whole.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a motion by Councillors Bruni and Shoemaker, resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated May 25, 2020 be received as information, and that's open for voting.
So if you could all cast your votes, please, for the purposes of people watching us at home. All in favor? Motion's carried. Okay. Next motion, please, Madam Clerk.
And financial implications of COVID-19 response. A motion by Councillors Farrow and Hilsinger, resolved that the report of the Chief Financial Officer and Treasurer dated May 25, 2020 concerning the financial impacts of the city's COVID-19 response be received as information.
All in favor? Motion carried.
And then I have a motion by Councillors Bruni and Shoemaker, resolved that City Council now proceed into the Committee of the Whole to consider the following matter referred to it for consideration: COVID-19 pandemic.
All in favor? Motion carried. So once the clerk indicates that she's got the vote tabulated there, I'll proceed. Okay. So, Council, we wanted to give you an opportunity to offer your input, your suggestions, your ideas, your thoughts, both on what we've presented to you, but also what we're doing and how we're doing it. You know, we're working hard on our end, but we also need to work to keep you engaged, to keep you part of the process, and to make sure that you have some input and influence over what senior staff and I are doing around here as we move through this crisis. So really, this is an opportunity for us to listen to you. And we're going to do that. I was just going to start and go around the table, and then we'd go from there to have any kind of further discussion you thought was necessary. I'll start with Councillor Bruni. Councillor Bruni, if you have any comments you'd like to offer, we'd be happy to have them.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I just want to recognize our city staff and our community partners. Of course, under the guidance of Algoma Public Health. I think our city staff and our community partners have been working very, very hard. And I just want to basically say thank you to all of you. Now, regarding some input, I was very impressed with Mr. Vere's presentation. And I believe I would be excited to when he comes back to us with some results, as he mentioned in September. I think we're on the right path. Unfortunately, with this COVID-19, we kind of took a step backwards. We were moving forward, and COVID-19 has kind of put a halt to some of the projects. So I just appreciate Mr. Vere's presentation today or tonight. I have a better understanding of what the city staff and what our departments are doing. So thank you very much.
Good, thank you, Councilor Bruni. Councilor Christian.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my comments at the beginning of these presentations pretty much sums up how I feel. And I said it in the past when we've discussed this. I think our city staff and our leadership at City Hall has done a fantastic job. Our community partners, Algoma Public Health, the hospitals, the healthcare system, employers, businesses, we've all banded together. And I think the community as a whole has done extremely well. We've got a ways to go yet. I echo Councillor Bruni's thoughts on the progress we were making. I'm taking an optimistic view of this. I hinted at this during my last comments that I think a lot of the structure and the processes are already in place. And I'm hoping that as the federal and provincial governments get a better handle on their side and start making available monies to communities like ourselves, we'll be in a very good position to capitalize on it. We have plans for our post-secondary, advanced manufacturing. I would like to think that coming out of this, there's going to be more money available for us to actually implement some of these programs, which perhaps prior to the COVID pandemic may not have been as available to us. That's what I'm hoping for. Congratulations to Future Sault Ste. Marie Group. You've taken what was already started and you've positioned us to do the best we can in dealing with our situation as we come out of this. So thank you very much.
Councilor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just start by thanking all the community partners that worked through this COVID-19 process to date. As we all know, it's not over yet, but I think everyone has done a spectacular job until now. And these reports tonight are, I believe, just what we needed to know as a council. We need to put into perspective and what kind of situation we really are. And although we're still in a deficit position to up to May 31st, I really think we've done well. I really expected to see reports that would put us in a worse situation than what I'm seeing. I thought for sure we would be close to a $2 million deficit up until May. So I want to thank all of our staff and the way they handled this. I'm sure that they had a lot to do with the results of these reports, the numbers that we have so far. And I'm really hopeful that second quarter goes better than the first, or better than quarter one. And I realize, as everyone else knows, that it's pretty hard to judge where that's going to land because we just don't know what's coming down the pipe right now. I firmly believe that the federal and provincial governments need to step up now. I mean, they have done an exceptional job in rolling out programs that has helped everyone, employees, businesses, employers, and all that's left now are municipalities. And I think it's our turn. I think they have to realize, those two senior levels of government have to realize that these holes in our budgets, these deficits that we're going to incur because of COVID-19, cannot just be passed on to the taxpayer. The taxpayer is footing the bill for all of these programs, all of the programs that have come from the federal and provincial government, and everything that we've done municipally. So we really need to rely on them to come through on this one. I understand that, you know, there's infrastructure stimulus projects that are coming, but those infrastructure stimulus projects, although we would welcome them, we have to realize that usually they are set up in a way that municipalities have to have some matching funds. And in a year where you have a deficit in your budget, it's pretty difficult to come up with matching funds when you're looking at trying to fill a budget hole with reserves that you would use in other times to finance these stimulus projects. So again, I want to thank everyone. I'm glad the numbers are showing what they have shown. I think they're pretty good, and I just want to hope for the best going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks to the councillors who preceded me. They all had good recommendations and positive words to thank staff for where they are up to today and the work that they've been doing. A couple of ideas that I hope that staff will consider that might assist in the recovery. So I know we're still in the management mode of trying to reduce the financial impacts as much as possible, but very quickly we're going to shift to recovery mode once the health concern is lessened, or once the numbers trend downwards again. And I think we have to be ready. And a couple things that perhaps could be considered to assist with the recovery. CAO White mentioned in his comments that they were looking at patio permits and patio fees, and I would hope that on an immediate basis, when the province allows patios, that we have a plan in place to waive permit fees for patios and simplify the application at the very least for this year, so that we can assist those restaurants, coffee shops that have the space and can safely physical distance, that we can assist them in recouping some of the lost revenue that they have suffered over the past number of weeks. Another option that hoping staff can consider is, or perhaps that will come to a future council meeting if staff can't do this on their own initiative or make a recommendation on their own initiative, is the having 50%ing of the mat tax this year. Because I think that the accommodation partners really are struggling through this, and I know that any amount that they can keep in their pocket will help keep them afloat. We don't have a huge surplus of hotel rooms and things of that nature in the city, and so to lose any accommodation institution in our city would be a significant detriment to our ability to support things like the tour train, conventions, conferences, special events, concerts, etc. So halving of the mat tax is, I'm hopeful, something that staff can look at, and if they can't make a recommendation on it without council action, to let us know, and perhaps we can take some steps in that regard. I was happy to hear in Mr. Vere's report that they're looking at a collaboration space. I know this is something that Councillor Christian, Councillor Hollingsworth, and I have discussed at various points in the last number of years that we've been on council. And I am hopeful that they can accelerate that, because I think had we had something like that established already, we'd be ahead of the game. But perhaps we can we can put the pedal to the metal in the development of a collaboration space, so that when we come out of this and we are marketing ourselves to individuals and companies, although I think that coming out of this, marketing ourselves to individuals will be more important, because the companies will be less defined by four walls than they have been in the past. So the individuals who you want to convince to move here. Accelerate the development of a collaboration space, come to council with a plan to make that happen, so that we can be ready to go when, right now, really, when places are looking for options for working from home. We need to be able to sell ourselves as somewhere that is ready to do this. And then another one would be, and my last one, would be a discount on permit fees for the balance of the year, or whatever the case might be. So if we perhaps can put some conditions on it, that construction has to start once the permit is issued within the next 6 months, that in itself could spur the construction industry, could spur development and contracting work that might not otherwise have been done this year, would help the residents who are planning on doing this work perhaps next year, perhaps the year after, accelerate their work, and would be good for the economy as a whole. So those are a few things that I hope council or staff will consider. And if there is any of those steps that need action from council, by all means, let us know, because I think that we are ready to help. And obviously, any of these will have an impact on our budget. But as Councillor Nero mentioned, the hole isn't as big as perhaps we thought it was going to be. Hopefully, the trend is that it decreases next quarter and continues to decrease in future quarters. But the fact that we are in a better position than we might have otherwise been, had the worst case scenario played out, gives us the flexibility to take some of these steps to try and get back some of the lost ground that has been lost over the last number of weeks. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. We will move on to Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Several pieces have already been mentioned by me earlier, but I do want to emphasize that I hope the staff, I hope your worship will continue to lobby the province, lobby our MP, lobby our MPPs to make sure they understand that Northern Ontario, our region, is very different from Southern Ontario. And as someone said earlier, I don't know if it's Councillor Nero said, but maybe potentially we can be treated a little differently, and our numbers, our testing numbers are coming in still fairly low. So hopefully we don't have to always be under the strict mandate of Southern Ontario. Again, talking about patios, Mr. White, if you want to see the articles that I have with what Hamilton's doing around the patios, what Toronto's doing around the patios, I'd be glad to share those articles with you. Again, they seem to be looking, as Councillor Shoemaker said, and as I said earlier, reducing and eliminating the fees on patios, expanding onto the streets for a certain time. I really feel strongly that potentially we can get this up and running sooner than later. And testing, I please emphasize that, Mr. White, in your worship, please go back and ask when the retirement homes are going to be tested. They're as vulnerable as the long-term care homes. They're full of seniors. Please, can we see the testing being done ASAP on that? As I mentioned, outdoor dining districts, which we talked about earlier. Canada Day. I had a privilege to have a conversation with Mr. White about Canada Day. I hope that we can put our thinking caps on and come up with some creative ideas on how to create a Canada Day spirit. It's my understanding that maybe we're not going to be able to do fireworks, but is there anything that you can send out to the community about Canada Day? People are starting to ask about that. And most of all, re-engineering our City Hall. There are a number of people that do work well at home. It is the new future. Can we look and consider asking ourselves, why are we bringing everyone back? Is there opportunity to create some new re-engineering, and maybe working with HR, some new ideas about that can come about. And immigration, glad to hear that immigration is still strong and looking forward to seeing results. Also, Mr. Ver, would you consider please considering doing an account manager approach with our businesses? When a business is moving to Sault Ste. Marie or even an existing business, assign an account manager where they will cut through the red tape, that they will do all the navigating for the business, that you only deal with one person instead of dealing with 2 or 3 different departments. Introduce the account manager model. And also shovel ready. I'm happy to hear about the shovel ready. There was mention about building permits. I know construction is now on its way at all different levels. And so far I hear that the building department is doing an excellent job in getting those permits out. Well done to our building department. Keep it up. And with regards to the smart industrial park, there was a resolution that was put forward a year ago. I hope to see that on our table about what we're doing about the smart industrial business park, which would attract new entrepreneurs, which would attract businesses. Happy to see that our real estate market is still doing very well in our community. Toronto's not, but we are. And also in closing, I just echo that it's a wonderful opportunity to share some of these ideas. And thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. Councillor Dufour.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In terms of the pandemic, some of the things that I would like senior staff to take away, and I know I've spoken with some on, some lessons for City Hall, things that we've learned that we might want to keep. I know the building inspections to be offered remotely for simple building inspections has worked well, has been popular. I think that's something that staff may want to consider an element of keeping around even after the pandemic has passed. I'm very excited to hear more about what a re-engineered City Hall might look like, what a single front desk, so to speak, at our office might look like. In terms of the recovery, I just think it's really important to highlight the importance of keeping up capital spending during this time for our local economy, but the importance of that capital spending being dollars that are coming from reserves and borrowing, not from direct levy increases, especially within the year in which we're experiencing this economic contraction. So thank you for this time, Mr. Mayor, and that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Councillor Dufour. Councillor Hilsinger.
Hello. Thank you. So I have a few things, and there's been a lot of thank yous this evening, and they're all very important and very necessary. I wanted to take a moment just to thank the residents of our community for really in large part, and if not entirely, following the rules and keeping our community very safe, and that's going to do us well in the long run. So while there are many challenges, there are many, many, many opportunities, and Mr. Ver's report certainly highlighted a number of those things. And I think it's urgent that we have a very formal, focused, and concentrated effort to take advantage of these opportunities, and for those that effort to turn into action as quickly as possible. I certainly think it's very important for us as a municipality to actively join many, many other communities in Canada to advocate for federal and provincial support in this very challenging time. We need it, and we should be doing that intensively. I'm certainly looking forward to seeing more of our businesses be able to open. That's one of the challenges around our Northern Ontario difference. We certainly are in a position that very safely we could have businesses opening, our retail, our restaurants, our services, like our hair stylists and estheticians, and some of arts and culture opportunities and facilities. It's really crucial that we safely make these things happen as quickly as we possibly can over time.
I would like to advocate for creating more spaces for walking and cycling with physical distancing. I've had a number of residents share and write to me looking for that to occur here in Sault Ste. Marie. It is occurring in many other cities. And I think it's something that we should be taking a look at. It's along the lines of growing space for patios and so on. It's taking that outdoor space and giving people the chance to get outside and to socialize, but to socialize very safely. I think it's time for innovative development. It's time for us to be bold. And I look forward to working on things that are going to make a difference in the community and while keeping everyone safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gardy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The information we've been presented with this evening from senior staff about COVID-19, makes us aware that we're doing quite well fiscally. And this isn't a coincidence. I think it's been acknowledged by my colleagues here tonight that it's because of hard work, and a lot of the hard work that we've done over the course of the last year or two, especially as we move through another challenging time specific to our community. This time, though, isn't just specific to our community. It's presenting the world with challenges. And I think as a community, some of our greatest opportunities may come out of some of the specific challenges that this pandemic has presented. So I would argue that as a community, we look to opportunities in food security, in public health, in the health of elders, in the health of Indigenous people. There are, in my mind, there's going to be, a time before the pandemic and after, and it's going to be looked back for decades. And there may not be a more opportune time for a community to set its direction than moving its way and out of this crisis. And I don't think ever in the history of our community, potentially, there's ever been a position where an ordinary everyday citizen could impact our future as much as they can currently. And that means by acting vigilantly and not letting complacency sneak back into our daily lives when it comes to this disease. So, there are places in the world, and I'll be quick here, as in New Zealand, Prime Minister Ardern in New Zealand has been getting a lot of credit for the work that she and her government has done over the course of these last several weeks. They're in as good of a position as anyone. And they've been getting a lot of interest from people and from businesses. And, the one thing that we can do for our community is to continue to navigate as well as we have. But, one thing that was resonant with me tonight was something that Mr. White said at the beginning of his report, is that, there is evidence of community spread. Despite efforts, we are unable to track precisely where some of these people in our community contacted it. So it's most likely that it's out in the community. So, keep that in the back of your mind as you return to work, as you hopefully return to play and eventually to school, that we're vigilant. Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All the other councillors have made great points about all of this. I too share what Councillor Nero had said. I was expecting the financial impact to be worse. I was pleasantly surprised to see that it wasn't as bad as I had anticipated. Clearly evidence of hard work done by city staff. I do think that there is an opportunity in the chaos to reevaluate some things. Maybe offering more work from home, adapting different services that the city offers. Councillor Dufour's idea of continuing with the remote inspections, I think it was for small small items was a great idea. I think that it's beneficial to the community. It's beneficial to the city. I think that's a different type of innovation out of necessity that we're prepared to do. One of the counselors had mentioned that that's what future SSM has prepared us for, is we can stare adversity in the eye and look at innovation that we can find and adapt and move with it. And I think that we're very well prepared as a community. I do believe that Councillor Gardy is right. We need to stay vigilant. Despite our best efforts to prevent the spread, it will still happen. And then our efforts need to move into being aware and preventing it to spread or from spreading further. I know that there's a lot of talk in the United States right now and even in Canada that maybe there will be a second wave, all of that stuff. I think that if we're vigilant, we make sure that we're still keeping our distance, we're washing our hands, we're careful as we open up our businesses, that we will prevail. It looks great on the community. I know that in a post-COVID world, we'll be in a situation that we're prepared to say, hey, look at how Sault Ste. Marie handled this. We're a great community to live. You can work from home wherever you need to, now that a lot of businesses are offering the work from home option. I think that's a good sales pitch for us, showing how well we've done. I know that there are people in the community that are still struggling. I know this is difficult. I know there are businesses that would love to be open, but I think the important step is to make sure that everyone's healthy and safe, and we'll go as we can through that. We're almost there in the sense that, more things are opening. We're getting a phased approach. We're doing way better than Southern Ontario. I think if we just stay positive and hopeful. I don't have a whole lot of suggestions offhand that we could really do. I mean, once I saw the presentations from Tom and Malcolm, or Mr. Vare and Mr. White, like, I think we've had a great handle on it. I'm sure we can come up with some great ideas going forward. But I think that I have to give my highest regards to city staff. Everyone has been fantastic. Mr. Mayor, you've been extremely transparent. You've been very open with the community, offering up answers and questions weekly. So that's been fantastic. I can't say that there are many other communities that I know of that have handled it as well and as open as we have. And I think that that's important going forward, that we're very transparent in this. I think that the community appreciates that, and it gives us hope and know that we're in good hands. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Councillor Scott. So we've had a chance to hear from anybody. Did anybody have any follow-up comments that they wanted to make based on some Councillor Hilsinger, go ahead.
Thank you. I forgot one thing to mention, which was to very strongly speak in support of Councillor Shoemaker's request that we accelerate the collaboration space. It's a game changer for us in this community. We don't have anything like it. I think it's hugely important. I just wanted to add that in.
Okay, it's good to hear. Any other comments that arise from other councillors' comments before I kind of wrap up? And Matt, I see your dog, and I heard your little baby crying in the background there. It was nice to hear, actually.
Just one more thing, Mr. Mayor, if you got a second, if I could.
Go ahead.
I just, I wanted to mention that, if there's ever a time that, there are times when, you're out in the community and people question civil servants and those who work in the public sector. They're criticized often at every level. I think tonight, if the broader public was tuning in and read the reports and paid attention, they should know that they're being very well served by their local city staff, and they should be proud of the work that they've done at every level of the corporation.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap up. I just want to touch on a few things a few of you said, and then we'll move on. I think Councillor Bruni landed on something that's true, and it plays into something that Councillor Christian said. I really feel like we had some really good momentum and some positive things were happening, and we were moving forward well together. And then COVID has really kind of, affected a lot of our focus. So what I had said to the CAO when we were talking about the same issue, I said it took some speed off the pitch, but we still have a good pitch, and we still have really good plans in place. And as Councillor Christian pointed out, when you look at the work that the staff is doing, and you look at the reports that are before you, they're able to be that advanced and have that kind of work done, and because they're using great work that we had started. So the good decisions made by the last council and the really hard work done by the community for future Sault Ste. Marie is really paying off. And we're able to rely on those paradigms and those values and those plans to look forward. So I want to express a lot of confidence to the community that we, despite being in a challenging spot like the rest of our province and country, I think Sault Ste. Marie is well positioned to come through this strong and to be stronger for it. I have been really impressed by the quality of work in City Hall and across our community. And I think Councillor Gardy's point is important to reiterate. One of the things this crisis has shown us is that government matters. Governance matters, and it's important. And your municipality is an important institution in your city, and it's working hard to help the city get through this. And I think you're seeing that. Now, there were a number of other comments made. If councillors want for the next meeting to bring a motion to urge the provincial and federal governments to support municipalities directly, I'd be happy to see that motion. You know, I can tell you that we've had those discussions. You know, we are lobbying in that respect, but a motion from council would be welcome. If council wants to lobby on encouraging the province to have different opening paradigms for communities with low positive test rates like Sault Ste. Marie, as opposed to communities with higher test rates. And if they want, as a political kind of position and as, an administration, they want us to lobby for that, bring a motion to the next meeting to have that discussion. I'd encourage those discussions. I think that we are well positioned to continue to do really good work. And although some speed might have come off the pitch in the last few months, I think we can bring that speed back up in the next few months. And I think we could be well positioned for it. I do want to say that amidst all of this, it's critically important that we all recognize that we have to continue to follow public health's advice. One of the things about being a safe community and opening up with our businesses is keeping our positive test rates low. And the way we do that is we follow public health advice. If you have COVID-19 symptoms, self-isolate. If you don't, stay home. When you're out and about, physical distance, and wash your hands at all times. So, council, I appreciate your comments. I will reflect on them myself. Staff and I will talk about them. We'll look at how we move forward with some of them. Mr. Vera was on the line for all of them. He'll look at your comments in the context of the report he gave you tonight. We'll continue to work together. I'll continue to work with staff to move these processes along, and we'll be back to you. But one of the reasons why we're in the position we're in is I think we're all working together very collaboratively, not just us as a group, but across our community, and I'll make sure that continues. And I just thank you for your inputs and your comments. So, Madam Clerk, I think we need a motion to come out of committee of the whole. Is that correct?
Yes, I have a motion by Councillors Nero and Hilsinger, resolved that City Council rise from committee of the whole without reporting. And that is open for vote.
All in favor? Carried. So I think that leaves us with one motion, which is Councillor Hilsinger's motion. So when the clerk's ready, she'll read that, and then we'll have a discussion about Councillor Hilsinger's motion, and we'll go from there.
Motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Bruni, whereas on February 24, 2020, Council approved 5 new priority cycling routes: Lake Street, McDonald Avenue, North Street, Cora Road, and Gooley Avenue, and 2 multi-use paths, Northern Community Centre and James Street/Machine Shop, to be completed in 2020. And whereas staff advised in the February 24, 2020 Council report that public notice to neighbours fronting on roads where the cycling routes paths are proposed would be given and public information sessions hosted. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the ability to hold public gatherings, and whereas it is critical that construction of priority cycling routes and multi-use paths begin as soon as possible in order to complete the projects in the 2020 construction season, now therefore be it resolved that public notice be given in accordance with the guidelines set out in the January 2020 Council report for priority cycling routes and multi-use paths without holding public information sessions.
Okay, Councillor Hilsinger, did you want to speak to this first?
Compared to, sure. Yes, I'll be very brief.
As the mover of the motion,
Yes,
not
yes.
in comparison to anyone else.
No, I meant, I didn't know if you wanted someone from staff to speak to it first. So,
No.
you know, I'm sure everyone knows I'm a very passionate advocate for improving our cycling infrastructure. And I'm very grateful to Councillor Bruni for seconding this motion along with me. It's important that we continue to expand our cycling infrastructure, and under the current conditions, we can't do it quite the same way as we would like to. And we certainly want to take the benefit of timing and of better cost control as it would relate to getting these projects done and completed and out there for the members of our community to enjoy and recreate in and transport in. So you know, residents will certainly be informed of what's happening. This plan was approved by City Council in February of this year, and I'm looking for the support, and I hope I'll get that support from all of our councillors to move ahead as is noted in the resolution. Thank you.
Councillor Bruni, as a seconder, did you have any comments? If I can have Councillor Bruni's mic, please.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Councillor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support this, but one thing I did tell Councillor Hilsinger that I do want a public notice be given accordance to the guidelines set out in the January 20th, that at least the residents in the area that are affected with the bike paths will receive notice. So my question would, can I ask a question now?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
So to Mr. White, if the notices go out and there are residents that want to speak against it, what would the procedure be or the process?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, Council's approval of this and your approval of the report in January. For this type of project, public notice is required, and we had intended to hold public information sessions which would explain the implementation of the project. So with this, with the resolution before you, we would not be able to hold the public information sessions. However, what we would do is be providing notice, and that notice will also refer the residents back to our website where things are explained in great detail. They've got that ready to go. I've seen that. As far as providing their thoughts, I've certainly indicated to staff that we will receive all communication from residents, and for ideas or thoughts that residents may have to that are seen as valid ways to improve the implementation, staff will take that under advisement and try and assist that along. As far as making their feelings known, as if they are in opposition, they can certainly provide that communication to staff. The only difference that it would be from what was foreseen is that they will provide it through something like email communication to us or phone call, rather than at a public information session.
Thank you. And would the councillors receive that feedback from the residents?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, once that sort of feedback is collected, we can certainly pass it along to the councillors affected. So I would say in a specific ward where there's a cycling route, or if it crosses two wards, we can certainly provide that to the ward councillors affected.
And my final question, Mr. White, when the public notice is put out there, what's the time period that you will take responses from the residents in the area? Is it 30 days, 20 days?
I'm going to pass this along to our Director of Planning, Mr. McConnell, who has been working on this specific notice, and he can probably answer that.
Okay.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. This is a little different than what we had originally proposed. And it's as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. Normally we would allow and I'm looking at, we'll probably get notices out to the neighbors early next week. If this was a planning application, we would give 20 days notice. This is not a planning application, so we could do somewhat less, but to be consistent with the Planning Act, we could do 20 days notice.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, Councilor Bruni, I have Councilor Shoemaker next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If this report was, or if this request wasn't on the council agenda, Mr. CAO or perhaps Mr. McConnell, how did the city foresee doing public information or public open house, if you can call it that, on this type of issue?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, that's exactly what staff were wrestling with. The initial approval included public information sessions, and staff had met to consider that, and under current conditions, we were concerned that you could do that, a public information session effectively. We thought there might be a time in the future that you could do one. And we had indicated that to Councillor Hilsinger, who had wondered about it. But it would put a delay in implementing the cycling lanes for this year, which you had approved in February.
Is there, I mean, we see people going into retail stores to a small degree these days, and it's, a certain number of people capped in the store at a single time. My guess is that these public information sessions would not be as well attended as a Canadian Tire store on a Saturday. But I mean, is there a way that we could, get a big enough space, have folks who wish to attend in increments of, 5 or 10 at a time to explain, 5, I guess, at a time to explain the changes and go from there? I fear that if we say we're not going to do a public information session, there'll be some type of concern from the residents that we're trying to forego consultation altogether, which really is not the case. We're trying to ensure the infrastructure gets built, keep people safe, and at the same time inform the public with the notices, but we need to find that balance.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, I think if this resolution is passed, staff will certainly work to overcome the limitations of not having public information sessions. They are exactly what they say. They were to be public information sessions. We can still, in the notice, provide people with the links to reference the complete package of information that we would normally have conveyed at the information session. And they will have the ability to communicate with staff one-on-one and get the answers to their questions. As far as holding a public information session in a different way, I'm not sure that can be accommodated under the current restrictions. We have a non-congregate order from the province right now of no more than 5 in any one place at one time. And I think it's difficult to hold a public information session under those circumstances. It's not, I get what you're saying about retail, but I don't think it's quite the same.
I wanted to stop at one point for clarification to the public, is that these aren't consultations that Councillor Hilsinger is asking us to cancel. So there wouldn't be consultations on these bike lanes, right? They were part of our cycling master plan. They've been approved by council. Staff has been directed to move forward with them. What Councillor Hilsinger is suggesting we cancel is a public information session where, you give the information to the public, and it is certainly an opportunity for them to receive information. They can express opinion on it. but it's not as if those sessions are consultations as should we or shouldn't we do this. Those decisions have been made, and the decision was to do it. And in the context of COVID, what staff's saying is it's difficult to do these public information sessions, but the way the policy currently reads, we have to do them unless you tell us we can't, right? So that's why we're here today and this is in front of you. I just don't want to give anybody the impression that's watching that we're canceling consultations. We're actually not doing that. It would be, we wouldn't have the public information sessions. But as Councillor Bruni notes, everybody who would be affected will get notice and they'll be directed to our website where a lot of that public information will be made available to them.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. I think that is an important one. I guess providing the link is, I don't know. There's something about it that seems like we're just kind of dumping information on folks. I don't know if a video could be recorded explaining the changes, you know, with maps and interactive looks at what's being proposed. I think people want to receive the information, you know, in a easy to digest form rather than just saying, here's everything, go read it. So I'll leave that with you, Mr. CAO, for your consideration. But I think some multimedia aspect might cure the problem that I foresee.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, I think once you see the information and how it's presented on the website, you'll see that it does cover a lot of that and in a lot of that form that you're suggesting.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions or comments from city councillors? Councillor Scott, yeah, sorry I had you on the list here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is going to be in a similar vein to what Councillor Shoemaker was asking, but if we could, I really liked his idea at the end, if we could do some sort of interactive, basically something that the public would be getting if they were there in person, that would be important. But further to a comment that was made, I'm not sure who to direct this question toward, but historically speaking, if we had one of these public information sessions and for some reason it was overwhelmingly negative from the community, would that affect any change at all on a proposal, or that's just, we take that in, we give what we're doing, and it's already at this point, this is strictly information. Even if it were overwhelmingly negative, it wouldn't change anything. Is that how that would work?
Well, Mr. CEO, I can kind of offer my perspective on that, and you can follow up if you think I've missed anything. The reality, Councillor Scott, is at any point, council can change a decision it's made. So we've made the decision to do this, to move forward with it. If you had a session and it was negative and it came back to city council, could you change the decision you've made? Yes. But you saw the last time we did bike lanes, there was some objection at council, and council decided to move forward with it because it was part of the cycling master plan that was approved. Council decided to move forward with those lanes. And we heard everybody out at council, but we move forward. So really, the decision on whether we move forward or not is completely within our jurisdiction. But at a public information session that staff holds, the decision isn't being changed there, right? It would have to get back to council to be changed. And it didn't happen last time, and I don't expect it would happen next time, because these are all decisions that were made in the context of plans that we've already asked staff to work on. Mr. CEO, did you have anything to offer there?
No, Mr. Mayor, I think you covered it.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I figured as much. And my concern isn't so much that, like, I can't foresee us going against this. This is all approved, good stuff for the community and all of that. I just want to make sure that the public has a fair shake at this, and they get their fair say, and that they're not missing out on anything. I would hate to use the COVID situation almost, and I'm not saying that's what we're doing, to forego due process that we would normally undertake. I just want to make sure everything's fair and on the up and up. And that's kind of where my concerns are on this, is that I just want to make sure that what we offer the community is the same, either virtually through a link. I mean, that's unfortunate that might have to be the case, but in that way, I just want to make sure that they're getting the same information they would be if this were any regular day.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Scott, they will get the information as far as we can make it the same as they would have gotten at an actual public information session. But just the distinction the mayor made should be clear to council. These were to be public information sessions, not public consultation sessions.
Okay. Yeah, so that's good. As long as all the information is there still provided, they have the same amount of time to kind of digest it, then I would be fine with that. Just as long as the only difference is the venue rather than the information.
Okay, so council, any more questions? Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I guess I'm going to ask either Mr. White or Mr. McConnell if he's still there. You know, traditionally, like as I think Mr. Bruni mentioned, or you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, traditionally, those that are affected directly, this is where that information is presented to them, correct?
Well, they get it's a two-star like they send notice out.
Right.
People will get notice, and then there's another session people can go to get information.
Right. Just for historically here, the last time we had one of these sessions for the last set of bike lanes that were activated, how well were they attended? Through you to Mr. McConnell, maybe?
McConnell. Yeah, maybe Mr. McConnell could answer that. Mr. McConnell, how many people came to the public information session for the last bike lanes?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have an exact number, but they were very well attended. There was great interest. And I would like to just point one thing out, though. Like, instead of holding a meeting where somebody has to come to a particular meeting and meet with staff, people who look at the mailed notice, people who look at the website and still have questions or still have concerns are welcome to call staff directly and talk about it, which is the same thing we would be doing if we were in a meeting.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Gardy?
Yeah, mine was specifically as to the number of people who attended, and it sounded like that they were attended quite well. Like, to me, if I look at this, you know, the Northern Community Center and the machine shop kind of multi-use paths, pretty much a no-brainer. The others affect people much more directly, just in terms of in front of their driveways and stuff. That's all I got to say on that. But like, I'm generally supportive of where Mrs. Hilsinger wants to go with this, or where Councilor Hilsinger wants to go with this.
Okay. Council, are we satisfied on our questions? The motion's been read, so if we can have the vote on the motion. All in favor, if you can do a show of hands, all in favor. Opposed? The motion's carried. You can all submit your votes on e-scribe, please. Madam Clerk, I think that brings us to bylaws, does it not?
I'm just waiting for Councillor Hollingsworth and Councillor Shoemaker. I can enter manually if you.
I think they were both in favor.
Okay. Thank you. So I have a motion by Councillors Bruni and Hilsinger resolved that all bylaws under item 11 of the agenda save and accept bylaw 2020-115 under date May 25, 2020 be approved.
All in favor? That's carried.
And a motion by Councillors Nero and Shoemaker resolved that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. Thanks, council. Thanks for your patience. We'll see you again soon.
Hey, everybody.
Oh, see you soon.